The Secret Island by Enid Blyton. Mike, Peggy and Nora were sitting in the fields talking together. They were very unhappy. Nora was crying and wouldn't stop. As they sat there, they heard a low call. "Cooey." "There's Jack," said Mike. "Dry your eyes, Nora. Jack will cheer you up." A boy came running by the hedge and sat down by them. He had a face as brown as a berry and bright blue eyes that shone with mischief. "Hello," he said. "What's up, Nora? Crying again?"
"Yes," said Nora, wiping her eyes. "Aunt Harriet slapped me 6 times this morning because I didn't wash the curtains well enough. Look."
She showed him her arm, red with slaps. "Oh, it's a shame," said Jack. "If only our father and mother were here, they wouldn't let us live like this," said Mike. "How long is it since they've been gone?" asked Jack. "It's over 2 years now," said Mike. "Dad built a fine new aeroplane, you know, and he set off to fly to Australia. Mother went with him because she loves flying too. They nearly got there, and then nothing more was heard of them."
"And I know Aunt Harriet and Uncle Henry think that they will never come back again," said Nora, beginning to cry once more.
"Don't cry any more, Nora," said Peggy. "Your eyes will get so red and horrid. I'll do the washing instead of you next time." Jack put his arm round Nora. He liked her best of them all. She was the smallest, although she was Mike's twin. She had a little face and a head of black curls. Peggy had yellow hair and was a year older. Nobody knew how old Jack was. He didn't know himself. He lived with his grandfather on a tumble-down farm and worked as hard as a man, although he wasn't much bigger than Mike. He had made friends with the children as they wandered through the fields. He knew how to catch rabbits. He knew how to catch fish in the river. He knew where the best nuts and blackberries were to be found. In fact, he knew everything, the children thought. Jack was always dressed in raggedy things. His feet were bare, and his legs were scratched with brambles. He never grumbled. He never whined. He made a joke of everything, and he had been a good friend to the 3 miserable children.
"Ever since Aunt Harriet made up her mind that Mummy and Daddy wouldn't come back, she has been perfectly horrid," said Nora.
"And so has Uncle Henry," said Mike. "We none of us go to school now, and I have to help Uncle in the fields from morning till night."
"I do every bit of the washing now," said Nora. "I wouldn't mind the little things, but the sheets are so big and heavy."
"And I do all the cooking," said Peggy. "Yesterday I burnt a cake because the oven got too hot, and Aunt Harriet sent me to bed for the rest of the day without anything to eat at all." "I climbed through the window and gave her some bread and cheese," said Mike, "and Uncle caught me and shook me so hard I couldn't stand up afterwards. I had to go without my supper, and my breakfast this morning was only a small piece of bread."
"We haven't had any new clothes for months," said Peggy. "My shoes are dreadful, and I don't know what we shall do when the winter comes, because none of our coats will fit us."
"You're much worse off than I am," said Jack. "I've never had anything nice, so I don't miss it. But you've had everything you wanted, and now it's all taken away from you. You haven't even a father and mother you can go to for help." "Do you remember your father and mother, Jack?" asked Mike. "Did you always live with your old grandfather?" "I never remember anyone except him," said Jack. "He's talking of going to live with an aunt of mine. If he does, I shall be left all alone, for she won't have me too."
"Oh, Jack, whatever will you do?" asked Nora.
"I shall be all right," said Jack. "The thing is, what are you 3 going to do? Oh, I hate to see you all unhappy. If only we could all run away together." "We should be found at once and brought back," said Mike gloomily. "If I knew some place where we would never be found, I would run away, and take the 2 girls with me too. I hate to see them slapped and worked hard by Aunt Harriet." "Now listen to me," said Jack suddenly, in such an earnest voice that all the 3 children turned to him at once. "If I tell you a very great secret,
Will you promise never to say a word about it to anyone?" "Oh, yes, Jack, we promise," said all three. "Well, listen. I know a place where nobody could find us if we ran away." "Where is it, Jack?" "I'll show you this evening," said Jack, getting up. "Be by the lakeside at 8 o'clock, when all your work is done, and I'll meet you there. I must go now, or Grandpa will be angry with me, and perhaps lock me into my room so that I can't get out again today." Jack ran off, and the three children made their way slowly back to Uncle Henry's farm. They'd taken their dinner out into the fields to eat, and now they had to go back to work. Nora had a great deal of ironing to do, and Peggy had to clean the kitchen. "I've got to go and clean out the barn," said Mike to the girls, "but I'll be in at supper time, and afterwards we'll see about this great secret of Jack's." They all got into trouble, because they were thinking so hard of the evening that they didn't do their work to Aunt Harriet's liking, nor to Uncle Henry's either. Nora got a few more slaps, and Peggy was scolded so hard that she cried bitterly into her overall. She was made to scrub the kitchen floor all over again. Mike was shouted at by Uncle Henry for spilling some corn in the barn. The little boy said nothing, but he made up his mind that if it was possible to run away in safety, he would do so, and take the girls with him too. The children ate their supper of bread and cheese in silence. When they had finished, Mike spoke to his aunt. "Please, may we go for a walk in the fields before we go to bed?" he asked. "No, you can't," said Aunt Harriet. "You'll just go to bed, all of you. There's a lot of work to do tomorrow, and I want you up early." The children looked at one another in dismay, but they had to do as they were told. They went upstairs to the big bedroom they all shared. "I believe Aunt Harriet and Uncle Henry are going out tonight, and that's why they want us to go to bed early," said Mike. "Well, if they do go out, we'll slip down and meet Jack by the river." "We won't get undressed then," said Nora. "We'll just slip under the sheets dressed, and then it won't take us long to run down to the lake." The three children listened hard. They heard the front door close. Mike popped out of bed and ran to the front room. From there he could see the path to the gate. He saw his uncle and aunt walk down it, dressed to go out. He ran back to the others. "We'll wait 5 minutes," he said, "and then we'll go." They waited quietly. Then they all slipped downstairs and out of the back door. They ran down to the lake as fast as they could. Jack was there, waiting for them. "Hello, Jack," said Mike. "Here we are at last." "What's your great secret, Jack?" asked Nora. "We're longing to know." "Well, listen," said Jack. "You know what a big lake this is, don't you? Perfectly wild all round except at the two ends where there are a few farmhouses and cottages. Now, I know a little island, a good way up the south side of the lake, that I'm sure nobody knows at all. I only found it quite by chance one day. The woods come right down to the lakeside opposite the island, and they're so thick that I don't think anyone has ever been through them, and so no one can have seen my island." "Jack, Jack, take us to your secret island," begged Nora. "Oh, we must go. We're all tired, but we must see the secret island." "Come on, then," said Jack. "Follow me. It's a good way." The barefooted boy took the three children across the fields to a wood. He thread his way through the trees as if he were a rabbit. The wood thinned out and changed to a common, which, in turn, gave way to another wood. But this time the trees were so thick that it seemed as if there was no way through them at all. But Jack kept on. At last they caught sight of the gleam of water. They had come back to the lakeside again. The evening was dim. The sun had sunk long since, and the children could hardly see. Jack pushed his way through the trees that grew down to the waterside. He stood there and pointed silently to something. The children crowded round him. "My secret island," said Jack. And so it was. The little island seemed to float on the dark lake waters. Trees grew on it, and a little hill rose in the middle of it. It was a mysterious island, lonely and beautiful. All the children stood and gazed at it, loving it and longing to go to it. It looked so secret, almost magic. "Well," said Jack at last, "what do you think? Shall we run away and live on the secret island?" "Yes," whispered all the children. "Let's." The 3 children thought of nothing else but Jack's secret island all the next day. "Mike, we must go," said Nora. "Mike, let's tell Jack we'll go," said Peggy. Mike scratched his curly black head. He felt old and worried. He wanted to go very badly. But would the 3 of them really be able to stand a wild life like that? No proper beds to sleep in, perhaps no proper food to eat, and suppose one of them were ill? Well, they would have to chance all that. They could always come back if things went too wrong. "We'll go," said Mike. "We'll plan it all with Jack. He knows better than we do." So that night, when they met Jack, the 4 of them laid their plans. "Could we go over to the island and just see what it's like before we go to live there?" asked Nora. "I would so love to see it." "Yes," said Jack. "We'll go on Sunday." "Well, how can we go?" asked Mike. "Do we have to swim?" "No," said Jack. "I have an old boat. It was one that had been left to fall to pieces, and I found it and patched it up. I'll take you over in that." The children could hardly wait for Sunday to come. They had to do a certain amount of work on Sundays, but usually they were allowed to take their dinner out and have a picnic afterwards. It was June. The days were long and sunny. The farm garden was full of peas, broad beans, gooseberries and ripening cherries. The children stole into it and picked as many pea pods as they could find and pulled up 2 big lettuces. They had a loaf of bread between them, some butter and some slices of ham, as well as the peas and lettuces. Mike pulled up some carrots too. He said that they would taste most delicious with the ham. They hurried off to meet Jack. He was by the lakeside, carrying a bag on his back. He had his dinner in it. He showed them some fine red cherries and a round cake. "Mrs. Lane gave me these for hoeing her garden yesterday," he said. "We'll have a fine dinner between us." "Where's the boat, Jack?" said Nora. "You wait and see," said Jack. He set off in the hot June sunshine, and the 3 children followed him. He kept close to the lakeside, and although the children kept a sharp lookout for the boat, they did not see it until Jack stopped and showed it to them. "See that great alder bush hanging over the lake just there?" he said. "Well, my boat's underneath it. It's well hidden, isn't it?" The children pulled out the boat from under the thick tree. It was quite a big one, but very, very old. It had a good deal of water in, and Jack set everyone to work bailing it out. There was an old pair of oars in the boat, and Jack put them in place. "Now get in. Would you like to take an oar, Mike?" Of course Mike would. The 2 boys rowed over the water. The sun shone down hotly, but there was a little breeze that blew every now and again. Soon the children saw the secret island in the distance. The secret island had looked mysterious enough on the night they had seen it before, but now, swimming in the hot June haze, it seemed more enchanting than ever. "Here's the landing place," said Jack, and he guided the boat to a sloping sandy beach. He pulled it up on the sand, and the children jumped out and looked round. The landing place was a natural little cove, a lovely spot for a picnic, but picnickers never came here. Only a lonely otter lay on the sand now and again, and moorhens scuttled across it. No fire had ever been made on this little beach to boil a kettle. No bits of old orange peel lay about, or rusty tins. It was quite unspoilt. "Let's leave our things here and explore a bit," said Mike. They left the little cove and went up through the thick trees. There were willows, alders, hazels, and elderberries at first, and then, as they went up the hill that lay behind the cover, there were silver birches and oaks. The hill was quite steep, and from the top the children could see a very long way, up the lake and down the lake. "I say, If we come here to live, this hill will make an awfully good place to watch for enemies from, said Mike excitedly.
Yes, said Jack. Nobody'd be able to take us by surprise.
We must come here, we must, said Nora. Oh, look at those rabbits, Peggy. They're as tame as can be. Why are they so tame, Mike?
I suppose because they're not used to people, said Mike. What's the other side of the hill, Jack? Shall we go down to it? There are caves on the other side of the hill, said Jack. I haven't explored those. They'd make good hiding places if anyone ever came to look for us here.
Jack, where shall we live on this island? Said Peggy, who always liked to have everything well settled in her mind.
We shall build a house of wood, said Jack. I know how to. That will do finely for the summer, and for the winter we will have to find a cave, I think. The children gazed at one another in glee. A house of wood built by themselves, and a cave. They went back to the little landing place, hungry and happy. They sat down and ate their bread and ham, carrots and peas, cherries and lettuces and cake. It was the loveliest meal they had ever had in their lives, they thought.
If I could live here, on this secret island, always and always and always, and never grow up at all, I would be quite happy, said Nora.
Well, we'll have a shot at living here for a good while at least, said Jack. Now, when shall we come? And what shall we bring? Said Mike. Well, we don't really need a great deal at present, said Jack. We can make soft beds of heather and bracken to lie on at night. What would be useful would be things like enamel mugs and plates and knives. I'll bring an axe and a very sharp woodman's knife. We'll need those when we build our house. Oh, and matches would be most useful for lighting fires. We shall have to cook our meals. I'll bring my fishing line along too. The more the children talked about their plan, the more excited they got. At last they had arranged what to bring. They were gradually to hide things in a hollow tree by the lakeside, and then, when the time came, they could carry them to the boat and row off to the secret island ready to set up house there. We'd better fix a day for starting off, said Jack. What about a week from now? Sunday would be a good day for running away, because no one will come to look for us until night time when we don't go home.
Yes! A week today!
Cried everyone. Now we must go home, said Jack, setting off to the boat. You can row if you like, Mike, and I'll bail out the water as we go. Get in, you girls. Aye, aye, Captain, they sang out. Off they all went, floating across the water in the evening light. What would they be doing next Sunday? All that week, the three children carried out their plans. Aunt Harriet and Uncle Henry could not understand what was different about the children. They did not seem to mind being scolded at all. The children took all the clothes they possessed down to the hollow tree by the lakeside. Mike took 4 enamel cups, some enamel plates, and 2 enamel dishes. Nora smuggled down an old kettle that Aunt Harriet had put away in a cupboard. Peggy took a frying pan and a saucepan to the hollow tree, and had to put up with a dreadful scolding when her aunt couldn't find them. Jack took a saucepan and an axe and a fine sharp knife. He also took some small knives and forks and spoons, for the other children did not dare to take these. "Can you get some empty tins to store things in?" asked Jack. "Yes, I'll get some," said Mike. "Uncle has plenty in the shed. And could you get matches, Jack? Aunt only leaves 1 box out, and that won't go far." "Well, I've got a small magnifying glass," said Jack, and he showed it to the others. "Look, if I focus the rays of the sun onto that bit of paper over there, see what happens. It burns it, and hey presto, there's a fire ready made." "Oh, good," said Mike. "We'll use that on a sunny day, Jack, and save our matches." "I'm bringing my work basket in case we need to sew anything," said Peggy. "And I've got a box of mixed nails and an old hammer," said Mike. "I found them in the shed." "We're getting on," said Jack, grinning. "I say, what a time we're going to have." The old hollow tree by the lakeside was soon full of the queerest collection of things. Not a day went by without something being added to it. At last, Sunday came. The children were up long before their uncle and aunt. They crept into the kitchen garden and picked a basket of peas, pulled up 6 lettuces, added as many ripe broad beans as they could find, a bunch of young carrots, some radishes, and putting their hands into the nest boxes of the hens, they found 6 new-laid eggs. Nora crept indoors and went to the larder. What could she take that Aunt Harriet wouldn't notice that morning? Some tea? Yes. A tin of cocoa from the top shelf, a packet of currants, and a tin of rice from the store shelf too. A big loaf and a few cakes from the cake tin. The little girl stuffed them all into her basket and raced out to join the others. Long before Aunt Harriet was up, all these things were safely in the hollow tree. They went back to the farm for the last time to breakfast. Peggy cooked the breakfast and hoped Aunt would not notice that her long iron cooking spoon was gone. She also hoped that Aunt would not want to get another candle from the packet in the larder, for Peggy knew Mike had taken the rest of them, and had taken an old lantern of Uncle's too. The children ate their breakfast in silence. Aunt Harriet looked at them. "I suppose you think you're going off for a picnic today," she said. "Well, you are not. You can stay and weed the kitchen garden, Peggy and Nora, and I've no doubt Uncle Henry can set Mike something to do. Someone has been taking cakes out of my tin, and so you'll all stay in today." The hearts of the 3 children sank. Today of all days! As soon as the girls were washing up alone in the scullery, Mike looked in at the window. "You girls slip off down to the lake as soon as you get a chance," he said. "Wait there for me. I won't be long." Peggy and Nora washed up a few more things, and then saw their aunt going upstairs. "She's gone to look out Uncle's Sunday suit and shirt," whispered Nora. "Quick, now's our chance." They raced out of the back door, down the path, and out into the fields. In 5 minutes' time, they were by the hollow tree, well out of sight. Jack was not there yet. Mike waited for the moment when his aunt discovered that the girls had gone, and then walked into the kitchen. "What's the matter, Aunt Harriet?" he asked, pretending to be very much surprised at her angry face and voice. "Where have those 2 girls gone?" "I expect they've only gone to get in the clothes or something. Shall I go and find them for you?" "Yes, and tell them they'll get well slapped for running off like this without finishing their work." Mike ran off, calling to his uncle that he was on an errand for his aunt. So Uncle Henry said nothing, but let him go. Mike tore across the fields to the lakeside and met the 2 girls there. They hugged one another in joy. "Now, where's Jack?" said Mike. "He said he would meet us as soon as he could." "There he is," said Nora. And sure enough, there was Jack coming across the field, waving to them. He carried a heavy bag into which he had crammed all sorts of things at the very last moment. Rope, an old mackintosh, 2 books, some newspapers, and other things. His face was shining with excitement. "Good, you're here," he said. "Yes, but we nearly couldn't come," said Nora, and she told Jack what had happened. "Now, we've got a lot to do," said Jack seriously. "First, all these things must be carried from the hollow tree to the boat. I expect we shall have to come back to the tree 3 or 4 times before it's emptied." The 4 of them set off happily, carrying as much as they could. The sun was hot, and they puffed and panted, but who cared? They were off to the secret island at last. It was a good thing that the boat was fairly big, or it would have never taken everything. The children had to bail out a good deal of water before they could put anything in the bottom. It leaked badly, but as long as someone could bail out with a tin, it was all right. "Now then," said Jack, looking round at the shore to see that nothing was left behind. "Are we ready?" "Aye, aye, Captain," roared the other 3. "Push off." The boat was pushed off. Mike and Jack took an oar each, for the boat was heavy and needed 2 people to pull it. It floated easily out onto the deeper water. "We're off at last,"
said Nora, in a little happy voice that sounded almost as if she was going to cry. It was a long way to the island. The sun rose higher and higher. The adventurers felt hotter and hotter. At last Nora pointed excitedly in front. "The secret island!" she cried. "The secret island!" Mike and Jack stopped rowing for a moment, and the boat floated on slowly by itself, whilst the four gazed at the lonely little island hidden so well on the heart of the lake. Their own island. It had no name. It was just the secret island. Mike and Jack rowed on again. They came to the little sandy cove beneath the willow trees. Jack jumped out and pulled the boat in. The others jumped out too and gazed round. "We're really here! We're really here! We're really here!" squealed Nora, jumping up and down and round in delight. "Come on, Nora, give us a hand," ordered Jack. "We've got a lot to do before night, you know." Nora ran to help. The boat had to be unloaded, and that was quite a job. All the things were put on the beach under the willow trees for the time being. By the time that was finished, the children were hotter than ever and very hungry and thirsty. "Oh, for a drink," groaned Mike. "Peggy, do you remember the way to the spring we found last Sunday?" asked Jack. "You do? Well, just go and fill this kettle with water, will you? We'll all have a drink and something to eat." Peggy ran off up the hill and down the other side to the spring. She filled the kettle and went back. The others had put out enamel mugs ready to drink from. Mike had put out a loaf of bread, some young carrots, a piece of cheese each, and a cake. What a meal that was! How they laughed and giggled and chattered. Then they lay back in the sun and shut their eyes. Jack said, "This won't do. We've got to get our beds for the night and arrange a good sleeping place. Come on, everyone, to work, to work." Peggy and Nora washed up the mugs and dishes in the lake water and set them in the sun to dry. The boys put all the stores in a good place and covered them with the old mackintosh in case it should rain. Tomorrow they would start to build their house. "This looks a fine place to sleep," said Jack. "Look, do you see this little place here, almost surrounded by gorse and carpeted with heather? The girls could sleep here, and we could sleep just outside their cosy spot to protect them. The oak trees would shelter us nicely overhead." "Oh, I do think this is fine. I do, cried Nora. She lay down on the heather. "It's as soft as can be." "All the same, Jack, the heather won't feel quite so soft when we've lain on it a few hours," said Mike. "We'd better get some armfuls of bracken too, hadn't we?" "Yes," said Jack. "Come on up the hill. There's plenty of bracken there." The four children gathered armfuls of bracken and put it out in the sun to wither and dry. "Well, there are our bedrooms ready," said Jack. "Now we'd better find a place to put our stores in. We won't be too far from the water because it's so useful for washing ourselves and our dishes in." The boys wandered up the beach, and at the back of the sandy cove they found just the very place they wanted. There was a sandy bank there, with a few old willows growing on top of it. Rain had worn away the sandy soil from their roots, and underneath there was a sort of shallow cave with roots running across it here and there. "Look at that," said Jack in delight. "Just the place we want for our stores. Nora, Peggy, come and look here." The girls came running. "Oh," said Peggy, pleased. "We can use those big roots as shelves and stand our tins and cups and dishes on them. Oh, it's a proper little larder." "Well, if you girls get the stores from the cove and arrange them neatly here," said Jack, "Mike and I will go and fill the kettle from the spring, and we'll see if there isn't a nearer spring, because it's a long way up the hill and down the other side." Leaving Peggy and Nora to arrange the tins, baskets, and odds and ends neatly in the root larder, the two boys went up the hill behind the cove. They separated to look for a spring, and Mike found one. It was a very tiny one, gushing out from under a small rock, and it ran down the hill like a little waterfall. "I expect it runs down into the lake," said Mike. "It's a very small spring, but we can use it to fill our kettle, and it won't take us quite so long as going to the other spring. If we have to live in the caves during the winter, the other spring will be more useful then, for it will be quite near the cave." They went down to the girls with the full kettle. Nora and Peggy proudly showed the boys how they had arranged the stores. "It's a nice dry place," said Peggy. "It's just right for a larder, and it's so nice and near the cove. Jack, where are we going to build our house?" Jack took the girls and Mike to the west end of the cove, where there was a thicket of willows. He forced his way through them and showed the others a fine, clear place right in the very middle of the trees. "Here's the very place," he said. "No one would ever guess there was a house just here if we built one. The willows would grow so thickly that I don't suppose anyone but ourselves would ever know that they could be got through." They talked about their house until they were tired out. They made their way back to the little beach, and Jack said they would each have a cup of cocoa, a piece of cake, and go to bed. He and Mike soon made a fire. There were plenty of dry twigs about, and bigger bits of wood. He used a match. He set the kettle on the fire to boil. They lay on their backs in the sand, looking up at the evening sky, listening to the crackle of the wood, and smelling a mixture of wood smoke and honeysuckle. At last, the kettle sent out a spurt of steam and began to hiss. It was boiling. Nora made the cocoa and handed it round in mugs. "There's no milk," she said, "but there is some sugar." They munched their cake and drank their cocoa. Though it had no milk in it, it was the nicest they had ever tasted. "I do like seeing the fire," said Nora. "Oh, Jack, why are you stamping it out?" "Well," said Jack, "people may be looking for us tonight, you know, and a spire of smoke from this island would give our hiding place away nicely. Come on now, everyone to bed. We've hard work to do tomorrow." "Our first night here," said Mike, standing up and looking down on the quiet waters of the lake. "We are all alone, the four of us, without a roof over our heads even. But I'm so happy." "So am I," said everyone. The girls went to their hidden green room in the gorse and lay down in their clothes. Mike threw them the old ragged rug. "Throw that over yourselves," he said. "It may be cold tonight, sleeping out for the first time. You won't be frightened, will you?" "No," said Peggy. "You two boys will be near, and anyway, what is there to be frightened of?" They lay down on the soft heather and pulled the old rug over them. The springy heather was softer than the old hard bed they had been used to at home. The little girls put their arms round one another and shut their eyes. They were asleep almost at once. What fun it was to wake up that first morning on the island. Jack awoke first. He heard a thrush singing so loudly on a tree nearby that he woke up with a jump. Soon all four children were up and about. Jack made them take off their things and have a dip in the lake. It was simply lovely, but the water was cold at first. When they dried themselves on an old sack, for they had no towels, the children felt terribly hungry. But Jack had been busy. He had set his fishing line, and even as they bathed, he had seen the float jerk up and down. It was not long before Jack proudly laid 4 fine trout on the sand of the cove and set about to make a fire to cook them. Mike went to fill the kettle to make some tea. Peggy got some big potatoes out of the sack and put them almost in the fire to cook them in their skins. Jack found the frying pan in the storeroom and put a piece of margarine in to fry the fish, which he knew exactly how to clean. "I don't know what we should do without you," said Mike as he watched Jack. "Goodness, how I shall enjoy my breakfast." They all did. The tea didn't taste very nice without milk. "It's a pity we can't get milk," said Jack. "We shall miss that, I'm afraid. Now, let's all wash up and put everything away, and then we'll start on our house." In great excitement, everything was washed up and put away. Then Jack led the way through the thick willow trees, and they came to the little clear place in the centre of them. "Now, this is how I mean to build the house," he said. "Do you see these little willow trees here? one there, 2 there, and 2 there. Well, I'll climb up on this first willow tree and swing the branches over with my weight. All you others must catch hold of them and hold them till I slip down. Then I'll climb another tree and bend those branches over too. We'll tie them together, and then I'll climb up the other trees. Once we've got all the top branches bending down, touching one another and overlapping nicely, we can cut long willow sticks and lace our roof together. I'll show you how to. Jack swung himself up into one of the little willow trees. It was only a young one with a small trunk, but it had a head of long, fine branches, easy to bend. Jack swung them down, and the girls and Mike caught them easily. They held on to them, whilst Jack slid down the tree and climbed another. He did the same thing there, bending down the supple branches until they reached and rested on top of those bent down from the other tree.
"Tie them together, Mike," shouted Jack. "Peggy, go and find that rope I brought."
Peggy darted off. She soon came back with the rope. Mike twisted it round the branches of the 2 trees and tied them firmly together. The whole morning was spent in this way. By dinner time, all the 6 trees had been carefully bent over. Jack showed Mike and the girls how to weave the branches together so that they held one another and made a fine, close roof. You see, if we use the trees like this, their leaves will still grow and will make a fine, thick roof, said Jack. Now, although our house has no walls as yet, we at least have a fine roof to shelter under if it rains.
"I want something to eat," said Nora. "I'm so hungry that I feel I could eat snails."
"Well, get out 4 eggs and we'll have some with potatoes," said Jack. "We'll boil the eggs in our saucepan. There's plenty of potatoes too. After the eggs are boiled, we'll boil some potatoes and mash them up. That'll be nice for a change. We'll nibble a few carrots too and have some of those cherries." "You'd better catch some more fish for tonight, Jack," said Peggy. "I hope our stores are going to last out a bit. We do seem to eat a lot." "I've been thinking about that," said Jack, watching the potatoes boiling. "I think I'll have to row to land occasionally and get more food. I can get it from Grandad's farm. There are plenty of potatoes there, and I can always get eggs from the hen house. Some of the hens are mine, and there's a cow that's really mine too, for Grandad gave her to me when she was a calf." "I wish we had hens and a cow here," said Peggy. "We should have lots of milk then, and plenty of eggs."
"How will we get hens and a cow here?" said Mike, laughing.
"I think Jack's idea of rowing across to land sometimes is a good one. He can go at night. He knows the way and could get back before day breaks." "It's dangerous, though," said Peggy. "Suppose he were caught. We couldn't do without Jack." In the afternoon, they returned to the willow thicket. Jack made himself busy. He chopped down some willow saplings with his axe and cut off the longer branches. "We'll use these to drive into the ground for walls," said Jack. "Where's that old spade, Mike? Did you bring it as I said?" "Yes, here it is," said Mike. "Shall I dig holes to drive the sapling trunks into?" "Yes," said Jack. "Dig them fairly deep." So Mike dug hard in the hot sun, making holes for Jack to ram the willow wood into. The girls stripped the leaves off the chopped-down trees, and with Jack's knife cut off the smaller twigs. They trimmed up the bigger branches nicely. Everyone worked hard until the sun began to go down. The house was not yet built. It would take some days to do that, but at any rate there was a fine roof and part of the wall was up. "We'll do no more today," said Jack. "We're all tired. I'll go and see if there are any fish on my line." But alas, there were no fish that night. "There's some bread left and a packet of currants," said Peggy, "and some lettuces and margarine. Shall we have those?" "This food question is going to be a difficult one," said Jack thoughtfully. "We've plenty of water. We shall soon have a house, but we must have food or we'll starve. I shall catch rabbits, I think." "Oh, no, Jack, don't do that," said Nora. "I do like rabbits so much." "So do I, Nora," said Jack. But if rabbits were not caught, the land would soon be overrun with them, you know. You've often had rabbit pie, haven't you? And I guess you liked it too.
Yes, I did, said Nora. Well, if you're sure you can catch them so that they're not hurt or in pain, Jack, I suppose you'll have to.
You leave it to me, said Jack. I don't like hurting things any more than you do. Ever since Peggy said she wished we had a cow and some hens, I've been thinking. I believe we could manage to get them over here onto the island. Then we'd be all right. Mike, Peggy and Nora stared at Jack in amazement. Let's hurry up and get the supper, said Jack, smiling at their surprised faces. I'm hungry. We'll think about things tomorrow. We'll have our meal now, and a quiet read afterwards, and then go to bed early. Tomorrow we'll go on with the house. Next day, after a meal of fish and lettuce, the 4 children worked hard at the house. Jack cut down enough young willows to make the walls. Mike dug the holes to drive in the willow stakes, which were set a little way apart, and Jack showed the girls how to take thin, supple willow branches and weave them in and out of the stakes to hold the walls in place and to fill up the gaps. That day, all the walls were finished, and the girls had gone a good way towards weaving the stakes together so that the walls stood firmly and looked nice and thick. I think it's lovely, said Peggy. What shall we call our house, Jack? Willow House, said Jack. That's the best name for it. It's a good name, said Peggy. I like it. I like everything here. It's the loveliest adventure that ever was. If only we had more to eat, said Mike, who seemed to feel hungry every hour of the day. That's the only thing I don't like about the adventure. Yes, said Jack. We'll have to put that right. Don't worry. We shall get over it somehow. That night there was nothing much to eat but potatoes. Jack said he would go off in the boat as soon as it was dark to see what he could find at his old farm. Wait up for me, he said to the others, and keep a small fire going, not big, in case the glow could be seen. The other 3 waited patiently for Jack to come back. He seemed a long, long time. Nora stretched herself out on the old rug and fell asleep, but Mike and Peggy kept awake. It seemed hours before they heard the splash of oars. Mike ran down to the edge of the water and waited. He saw the boat coming softly over the water in the moonlight. He called to Jack. "Hello there, Jack. Are you all right?" "Yes," said Jack's voice. "I've got plenty of news, too." The boat scraped on the sand and stones. Mike pulled it up the beach, and Jack jumped out. "I've got something here for us," said Jack, and they saw his white teeth in the moonlight as he grinned at them. "Put your hands down there in the boat, Nora." Nora did, and squealed. "Ugh! There's something soft and warm and feathery there," she said. "What is it?" "6 of my hens," said Jack. "I found them roosting in the hedges. I caught them and trussed them up so that they couldn't move. My word, they were heavy to carry. But we shall have plenty of eggs now. They can't escape from the island." "Hooray!" cried Peggy. "We can have eggs for breakfast, dinner and tea." "What else have you brought?" asked Mike. "Corn for the hens," said Jack, "and packets of seeds of all kinds from the shed, and some tins of milk, and a loaf of bread, rather stale, and lots more vegetables." "Did you see your grandfather?" asked Mike. "Yeah," grinned Jack, "but he didn't see me. He's going away to live with my aunt. The farm is to be shut up and someone is to feed the animals until it's sold. So I think I shall try and get my own cow somehow and make her swim across the lake to the island." "Oh, don't be silly, Jack," said Peggy. "You could never do that." "You don't know what I could do," said Jack. "Well, listen. I heard my granddad talking to 2 friends of his, and everyone is wondering where we've all gone. They've searched everywhere for us, in all the nearby towns and villages, and in all the country round about." "Oh," said the 3 children, feeling rather frightened. "Do you suppose they'll come here?" "Well, they may," said Jack. "You never know." "Is Aunt Harriet very upset?" asked Peggy. "Very," grinned Jack.
She's got no one to wash and scrub and cook for her now. But it's good news about my granddad going to live with my aunt. I can slip to and fro and not be seen by him now. My word, I wished you were with me when I got these hens. They did peck and scratch and flap about. I was afraid someone would hear them. Where shall we put them? Said Mike, helping Jack to carry them up the beach. I vote we put them into Willow House till the morning, said Jack. We can stop up the doorway with something. So they bundled the squawking hens into Willow House and stopped up the doorway with sticks and bracken. The hens fled to a corner and squatted there, terrified. "Oh, I'm jolly tired," said Jack. "Let's have a few cherries and go to bed." Next morning, Peggy woke first. She soon had a fire going, and when the others sat up rubbing their eyes, Peggy called them. "Come on, breakfast. The hens have laid us an egg each." They ran to breakfast. "We'll have a dip afterwards," said Mike. "I feel so hungry." "We must finish Willow House properly today," said Jack. "And we must decide what to do with the hens, too. They can't run loose till they know us and their new home. We must put up some sort of enclosure for them." After breakfast, the four of them set to work to make a tiny yard for the hens. They used willow stakes again and quickly built a fine little fence, too high for the hens to jump over. Jack made them nesting places of bracken and hoped that they would lay their eggs there. He scattered some seed for them and they pecked at it eagerly. Peggy gave them a dish of water. "They'll soon know that this is their home and lay their eggs here," said Jack. "Now, come on, let's get on with Willow House. You two girls stuff up the cracks with heather and bracken, and Mike and I will make the door." "I'm so hungry and thirsty now that I believe I could eat all the food we've got," said Mike at last. "Yes, we really must have something to eat," said Jack. "We've got plenty of bread and potatoes and vegetables. Let's cook some broad beans. Go and look at my fishing line, Mike, see if there are any fish on it." There was a fine trout, and Mike brought it back to cook. Soon the smell of frying rose on the air, and the children sniffed hungrily. Fish, potatoes, bread, beans, cherries, and cocoa with milk from one of Jack's tins. What a meal! "I'll think about getting Daisy the cow across next," said Jack, drinking his cocoa. "We simply must have milk." "You can't, Jack," cried Nora. "You'd never get a cow here." "I'll come with you, Jack," said Mike. "You'll want someone to help you." "Right," said Jack. "We'll start off as soon as it's dark." "Oh, Jack," said the girls, excited to think of a cow coming. "Where shall we keep it?" "It had better live on the other side of the island," said Jack. "There's some nice grass there. It won't like to eat heather." "How will you bring it, Jack?" asked Mike. "It'll be difficult to get it into the boat, won't it?" "We shan't get it into the boat, silly," said Jack, laughing. "We shall make it swim behind the boat." The other three stared at Jack in surprise. Then they began to laugh. When it was dark, the two boys set off. They rowed down the lake and came to the place where Jack usually landed. They dragged the boat in and then made their way through the wood. After some time, they came to the fields that lay round the house of Jack's grandfather. Jack looked at the old cottage. There was no light in it. No one was there. His grandfather had gone away. In the field nearby, some cows and horses stood. "Do you see that shed over there, Mike?" said Jack in a low voice. "Well, there are some lengths of rope there. Go and get them whilst I try to find which is my own cow." Mike stumbled off over the dark field to the tumble-down shed. Jack went among the cows, making a curious, chirrupy noise. A big brown and white cow left the others and went lumbering towards Jack. He rubbed its soft nose and called to Mike. "Hurry up with that rope! I've got the cow!" Mike had been feeling about in the shed for rope and had found a great coil of it. He stumbled over the field to Jack. "Good," said Jack, making a halter for the patient animal. "Now, before we go, I'd like to pop into the old cottage and see if I can find anything we'd be glad of." Some time later, Jack made his way slowly over the field to Mike. "I thought you were never coming," said Mike, half cross. "Whatever happened to you? This cow is getting tired of standing here with me." "I found a lot of my clothes," said Jack, "and an old blanket and 2 towels. The cow will soon get some exercise. Come on, you carry the towels and this blanket, and I'll take Daisy." The cow didn't like it when they came to the wood. She couldn't see where they were going, and she disliked being pulled through the close-set trees. She began to moo. It took the boys at least 2 hours before they were by the lake, panting and hot. Daisy had mooed dozens of times, each time more loudly than before, and Jack was beginning to think that his idea of taking her across to the island was not such a good one after all. Suppose her mooing gave them away, and people came after them. Still, they had at last got her to the boat. Jack persuaded the poor frightened cow to step into the water. The boys got into the boat and pushed off. Jack had tied the cow's rope to the stern of the boat. The boys bent to their oars, and poor Daisy found that she was being pulled off her feet into deeper water. It was a dreadful adventure for a cow who had never been out of her field before, except to be milked in a nearby shed. She waggled her long legs about and began to swim in a queer sort of way, holding her big head high out of the water. She was too frightened to moo. "Well, my idea is working," said Jack after a bit. "Yes," said Mike, "but I'm jolly glad it's only 1 cow we're taking, not a whole herd." They said no more till they came in sight of the island, which loomed up nearby, black and solid. The girls had heard the splashing of the oars and had come down to the beach. "Have you got the cow, Jack?" they called. "Yes, she's come along behind beautifully, but she doesn't like it, poor creature." They pulled the boat up the beach and then dragged out the shivering, frightened cow. Jack told Mike to get a sack and help him to rub the cow down, for she was cold and wet. "Where shall we put her for tonight?" asked Mike. "In the hen-yard," said Jack. "She's used to hens, and hens are used to her. There's a lot of bracken and heather there, and we can put some more armfuls in for her to lie on. She'll soon be warm and comfortable. She'll like to hear the clucking of the hens, too." So Daisy was pushed into the hen-yard, and there she lay down on the warm heather, comforted by the sound of the disturbed hens. The girls were so excited at seeing the cow. They asked the boys over and over again all about their adventure, till Mike and Jack were tired of telling it. "What's that funny light in the sky over there?" said Nora suddenly, pointing towards the east. "Look." "You silly, it's the dawn coming," said Jack. "It must be nearly daylight. Oh, come on, we really must go to sleep. What a night we've had." "Moo," said Daisy from the hen-yard, and the children laughed. "Daisy thinks so too," said Peggy. The next morning, the children slept very late indeed. The sun was high in the sky before anyone stirred, and even then they might not have awakened if Daisy the cow hadn't decided that it was more than time for her to be milked. She stood in the hen-yard and bellowed for all she was worth. Jack sat up, his heart thumping loudly. Whatever was that awful noise? Of course, it was Daisy. She wanted to be milked. "Hi, you others," he shouted. "Wake up! It must be about 9 o'clock, and Daisy wants to be milked." Mike grunted and opened his eyes. He felt very sleepy after his late night. The girls sat up and rubbed their eyes. Daisy bellowed again, and the hens clucked in fright. "Our farmyard wants its breakfast," grinned Jack. "Come on, lazy bones, come and help." They scrambled up. They were so very sleepy that they simply had to run down to the lake and dip their heads into the water before they could do anything. Then they all went to gloat over their cow. How pretty she was in her brown and white coat. A cow of their own. Oh, how lovely. "And what a voice she has," said Jack as the cow mooed again. "I must milk her." "But I say, we haven't a pail," said Mike. "Well, we must use the saucepans," said Jack firmly. and we can all do with a cup or two of milk to start the day. I'll use the biggest saucepan, and when it's full, I'll have to pour it into the bowls and jugs we've got, and the kettle too. There was more than enough milk to fill every bowl and jug and saucepan. The children drank cupful after cupful. It was lovely to have milk after drinking nothing but tea and cocoa, made with water.
I say, Daisy has trodden on a hen's egg and smashed it, said Nora,
looking into the hen yard. Never mind, said Jack. We won't keep her here after today. She shall go and live on that nice grassy piece, the other side of the island. Nora, feed the hens. They're clucking as if they'd never stop. They're hungry. Nora fed them. Then they all sat down to their breakfast of boiled eggs and creamy milk. Daisy the cow looked at them as they ate and mooed softly. She was hungry too. She can't get off the island, so we don't need to fence her in, said Jack. We must milk her twice a day, Mike. We must certainly get a pail from somewhere. There's an old milking pail in the barn at Aunt Harriet's farm, said Peggy. I'll go and get it tonight, said Mike. No, I'll go, said Jack. You might be caught. Well, so might you, said Mike. We'll go together. How shall we keep the milk cool? Wondered Peggy. It's jolly hot on this island. I'll make a little round place to fit the milk pail into, just by one of the springs, said Jack at once. Then, with the cool spring water running round the milk pail all day, the milk will keep beautifully fresh and cool. Oh, how clever you are, Jack, said Nora. No, I'm not, said Jack. It's just common sense, that's all. I do feel tired and stiff today, said Mike, stretching out his arms. It was pretty hard work pulling old Daisy along last night. We'd better have a restful day, said Jack, who was also feeling tired. For once in a while, we won't do anything. We'll just lie about and read and talk. The children had a lovely day. They bathed 3 times, for it was very hot. Nora read a book. Peggy got out her work basket and began on the long, long task of mending up the old clothes Jack had brought back the night before. The hens clucked in the hen yard. Daisy the cow mooed once or twice, feeling rather strange and lonely, but she seemed to be settling down very well. I hope she won't moo too much, thought Peggy, her needle flying in and out busily. She might give us away with her mooing if anyone came up the lake in a boat. But thank goodness, no one ever does. Everyone felt very fresh after their rest. They decided to have a walk round the island. I'll take you to the place where wild raspberries grow, said Jack. He led them round the hill to the west side, and there, in the blazing sun, the children saw scores of raspberry canes, tangled and thick. Jack, there are some getting ripe already, cried Nora in delight. She pointed to where spots of bright red dotted the canes. We'll have some of these with cream each day, said Peggy. I can skim the cream off the cow's milk, and we will have raspberries and cream for supper. Ooh! Are there any wild strawberries on the island too? Asked Nora. Yes, said Jack, but they don't come till later. We'll look for those in August and September. I do think this is a lovely island, said Peggy happily. We've a splendid house of our own. Hens, a cow, wild fruit growing, fresh water each day. It's all right now it's warm weather, said Jack. It won't be quite so glorious when the cold winds begin to blow. But winter's a long way off yet. They climbed up the west side of the hill, which was very rocky. They came to a big rock right at the very top and sat there. From far down below, the blue spire of smoke rose up from the fire. Let's play a game, said Jack. Let's play... But what game Jack wanted the others never knew, for Jack suddenly stopped and stared fixedly down to the blue sparkling lake. Some people in a boat, said Jack. Do you see them? Away down there. Yes, said Mike, going pale. Are they after us, do you think? No, said Jack after a while. I think I can hear a radio playing. They'll probably just trip us from the village at the other end of the lake. Do you think they'll come to the island? Asked Peggy. I don't know, said Jack. They may, but anyway it would only be for a little while. If we can hide all traces of our being here,
They won't know a thing about us." The children hurried down to the beach. Jack and Mike stamped out the fire and carried the charred wood to the bushes. They scattered clean sand over the place where they'd had the fire. They picked up all their belongings and hid them. "I don't think anyone would find Willow House," said Jack. "The trees really are too thick all round it for any tripper to bother to squeeze through." "What about the hens?" said Peggy. "We'll catch them and pop them into a sack just for now," said Jack. "But what about Daisy?" said Peggy, looking worried. "We'll watch and see which side of the island the trippers come to," said Jack. "As far as I know, there's only one landing place, and that's our beach. As Daisy is right on the other side of the island, they're not likely to see her unless they go exploring." "Where shall we hide?" said Nora. "We'll keep a lookout from the hill, hidden in the bracken," said Jack. "Will they find the things in the cave larder?" asked Nora, helping to catch the squawking hens. "Peggy, get some heather and bracken and stuff up the opening to the cave larder," said Jack. Peggy ran off at once. Jack put the hens gently into the sack one by one and ran up the hill with them. He went to the other side of the hill and came to one of the caves he knew. He called to Nora, who was just behind him. "Nora, sit at the little opening here and see that the hens don't get out. I'm going to empty them out of the sack into the cave." With much squawking and scuffling, the scared hens hopped out of the sack and ran into the little cave. Nora sat down at the entrance, hidden by the bracken that grew there. No hen could get out whilst she was there. "The boat is going round the island," whispered Jack as he parted the bracken at the top of the hill and looked down to the lake below. "They can't find a place to land. They're going round to our little beach. Well, Daisy the cow is safe if they don't go exploring. Hope she doesn't moo." Nora sat crouched against the entrance of the little cave. She could hear the 6 hens inside, clucking softly as they scratched about. Jack knelt near her, peering through the bracken, trying to see what the boat was doing. "Mike has rowed our own boat to where the brambles fall over the water and has pushed it under them," said Jack in a low voice. "I don't know where he is now. I can't see him." "Where's Peggy?" whispered Nora. "Here I am," said a low voice, and Peggy's head popped up above the bracken a little way down the hill. "I say, isn't this horrid? I do wish those people would go away." The sound of voices came up the hillside from the lake. "Here's a fine landing place," said one voice. "They found our beach," whispered Jack. "Pull the boat in," said a woman's voice. "We'll have our supper here. It's lovely." There was the sound of a boat being pulled a little way up the beach. Then the trippers got out. "I'll bring the radio," said someone. "You bring the supper things, Eddie." The 3 children crouched down in the bracken and listened. The trippers were setting out their supper. One of the hens in the cave began to cluck loudly. Nora thought it must have laid an egg. "Do you hear that noise?" said one of the trippers. "Sounds like a hen to me." "Don't be silly, Eddie," said a woman's voice scornfully. "How could a hen be on an island like this? That must have been a blackbird or something." "Pass the salt," said someone. "Thanks. I say, isn't this a fine little island, sort of secret and mysterious? What about exploring it after supper?" "That's a good idea," said Eddie's voice. "We will." The children looked at one another in dismay. "Where's Mike, do you suppose?" said Peggy in a low voice. "Do you think he's hiding in our boat?" "I expect so," whispered Jack. "Don't worry about him. He can look after himself all right." "Oh, my goodness, there's Daisy beginning to moo," groaned Peggy, as a dismal moo reached her ears. "She knows it's time she was milked." "Can you hear that cow mooing somewhere?" said one of the trippers in surprise. "Oh, I expect it's a cow in a field on the mainland," said another lazily. "You don't suppose there's a cow wandering loose on this tiny island, do you, Eddie?" "Well, I don't know," said Eddie in a puzzled voice. "Look over there.
Doesn't that look like a footprint in the sand to you?
The children held their breath. Could it be true that they had left a footprint on the sand?
And see here,
went on the tripper, holding up something.
Here's a piece of string I found on the beach. String doesn't grow, you know.
Oh, you're making a great mystery about nothing,
said one of the women crossly.
Other trippers have been here, that's all. Perhaps you're right, said Eddie. But all the same, I'm going to explore the island after supper. Oh, put the radio on, Eddie, said someone. I'm tired of hearing you talk so much.
Soon loud music blared through the air, and the children were glad, for they knew it would drown any sound of Daisy's mooing or the hens clucking. They sat in the bracken, looking scared and miserable. Nora began to cry softly. Jack looked at her and then crept silently up. He slipped his arm round her.
"Don't cry, Nora," he said. "Perhaps they won't have time to explore. It's getting dark now. Do you see that big black cloud coming up? Perhaps the trippers will think there's a storm coming and row off."
Nora dried her eyes and looked up. There certainly was a big black cloud.
"It looks like a thunderstorm,"
said Peggy, creeping up to join them.
"Ooh!"
said Nora suddenly, almost squealing out loud.
"Look! Someone's coming up the hill. I can see the bracken moving. It must be one of the trippers creeping up to find us."
The children went pale. They looked to where Nora pointed, and sure enough, they could see first one frond of bracken moving, and then another, and then another. Someone was certainly creeping up the hill, hidden under the fronds. Nora clutched hold of Jack.
"Don't make a sound," he whispered. "No one can possibly know we're here. Keep quiet, Nora. We'll slip inside the cave if he comes much nearer."
They sat silently watching the swaying of the tall bracken as the newcomer crept through it.
"Get inside the cave, you two girls," whispered Jack. "I think you'll be safe there. I'm going to slip round the hill and come up behind this person, whoever he is."
The girls crept just inside the cave and parted the bracken that grew around it to see what Jack was going to do. He was just slipping away when the person creeping up the hillside stopped his crawling. The bracken kept still. Then a head popped out of the bracken and Nora gave a loud squeal.
"Mike!" she said. "Mike!" "Shh, you silly chump," hissed Peggy, shaking her. "You'll be heard by the trippers."
Fortunately, the radio was going loudly, so Nora's squeal was not heard. Once more the bracken fronds began to move slightly as Mike made his way through them up to the cave.
"Oh, Mike," said Nora, "you did give us such a fright. We thought you were a tripper coming after us."
"I got a good view of them," said Mike, sitting down beside the others. "There are 3 men and 2 women. They're tucking into an enormous supper."
"Do you think they'll explore the island as they said?"
asked Peggy anxiously. "Perhaps this thunderstorm will put them off," said Mike, looking up at the black sky. "My word, it's brought the bats out early. Look at them." The hot, thundery evening had brought out thousands of insects, and the bats were having a great feast, catching the flies and beetles that flew through the air. And it was the bats that sent the trippers away. One of the women caught sight of 2 or 3 bats darting round under the trees, and she gave a shriek.
"Oh, bats! Oh, I can't bear bats. I'm frightened of them. Let's pack up and go quickly."
"They won't hurt you," said a man's voice. "Don't be silly."
"I can't help it. I'm frightened of them," said a woman. "I'm going."
"But I wanted to explore the island," said Eddie.
"Well, you'll have to explore it another day," said the woman. "Oh, and just look at the sky, too. There's going to be a dreadful storm."
All right, said Eddie in a sulky voice. "We'll go. Oh, fancy being frightened of a few bats."
The children on the hillside stared at one another in delight. The trippers were really going. Then Daisy the cow mooed loudly.
"Did you hear that?"
said one of the trippers.
"That was thunder in the distance."
The 4 children giggled. Nora rolled over and stuffed her hands into her mouth to stop laughing loudly.
"Good old Daisy," whispered Mike. "She's pretending to be a thunderstorm now to frighten them away." Nora gave a squeal of laughter, and Jack punched her. "Be quiet," he said. "Do you want us to be discovered just when everything's going so nicely?" The trippers were getting into their boat. They pushed off. The children heard the sound of oars and peeped out. They could see the boat, far down below, being rowed out onto the lake. A big wind sprang up and ruffled the water. The boat rocked to and fro.
"Oh, hurry!"
cried a woman's voice.
"We shall get caught in the storm. Oh, there's more of those horrid bats again. I'll never come to this nasty island any more."
"Jolly well hope you don't," said Jack, pretending to wave goodbye. The children watched the boat being rowed down the lake. The voices of the people came more and more faintly on the breeze. The last they heard was the radio being played once again. Then they saw and heard no more. The trippers were gone. A distant rumble of thunder was heard. Jack turned to the others. "Not Daisy mooing this time," he grinned. "Come on, there's a storm coming. We've plenty to do. I'll go and get Daisy to milk her. Nora and Mike, you catch the hens and take them back to the hen yard. And, Mike, make some sort of shelter for them with a couple of sacks over sticks or something so that they can hide there if they're frightened. Peggy, see if you can light the fire before the rain comes." "Aye, aye, Captain," shouted the children joyfully, full of delight to think that they had their island to themselves once more. There was certainly a thunderstorm coming. The sky was very black indeed, and it was getting dark. Nora and Mike caught the 6 hens in the little cave, bundled them gently into the sack, and raced off to the hen yard with them. Mike stuck 2 or 3 willow sticks into the ground at one end of the hen yard and draped the sack over them. "There you are, Henny Pennies," said Nora. "There is a nice little shelter for you." Plop, plop, plop. Enormous drops of rain fell down, and the hens gave a frightened squawk. They scuttled under the sack at once and lay there quietly, giving each other little pecks now and again. "Well, that settles the hens," said Mike. "I wonder how Peggy is getting on with the fire." Peggy was not getting on at all well. Jack arrived with Daisy the cow and shouted to her. "Never mind about the fire. Now that the rain's coming down so fast, you won't be able to light it. Get into Willow House, all of you, before you get too wet." "The girls can go," said Mike, running to help Jack. "I'll get the things to help you milk. My goodness, we haven't drunk all the milk yet that Daisy gave us this morning." Put it into a dish and pop it in the hen yard," said Jack. "Maybe the hens will like it." In the pouring rain, Jack milked Daisy the cow. Soon all the saucepans and the kettle and bowls were full. Really, thought Jack, he simply must get that old milking pail that the girls had told him of at their aunt's farm. When the milking was finished, Jack took Daisy back to her grassy field on the other side of the island. Mike went to Willow House where the 2 girls were. It was dark there, and the sound of rain drip, drip, dripping from the trees all around sounded rather miserable. Presently Jack came to Willow House dripping wet, but he was grinning away as usual. Nothing ever seemed to upset Jack. "Hello, hello," he said. "I'm as wet as a fish. Peggy, where do we put those clothes of mine that I brought to the island last night?" "Oh, yes," cried Peggy in delight. "Of course. You and Mike can change into those." The boys took off their wet clothes and changed into dry ones. "I'll hang your wet ones out to dry as soon as the rain stops," said Peggy, squeezing the rain out of them. The thunderstorm broke overhead. The thunder crashed around as if someone were moving heavy furniture up in the sky. "Hello, someone's dropped a wardrobe, I should think," said Jack when an extra heavy crash came. The lightning flashed brightly, lighting up the inside of Willow House. Nora was not sure that she liked it. She cuddled up to Mike. "I feel a bit frightened," she said. "Don't be silly," said Mike. "You're as bad as those women trippers over the bats. There's nothing to be frightened of. A storm is a grand thing. We're perfectly safe here." "A storm is just a bit of weather being noisy," laughed Jack. "Cheer up, Nora. We're all right. You can think you're lucky you're not Daisy the cow. After all, we do know that a storm is only a storm, but she doesn't." Gradually, the storm died away, and only the pitter-patter of raindrops falling from the trees could be heard, a singing, liquid sound. The lightning flashed for the last time.
The storm was over. "Now we'll have something to eat and a cup of milk to drink, and off to bed we'll go," said Jack. "We've had quite enough excitement for today. And Mike and I were so late last night that I'm sure he's dropping with sleep. I know I am." Peggy got a small meal for them all, and they drank Daisy's creamy milk. Then the girls went into the back room of Willow House and snuggled down on the warm heather there, and the boys lay down in the front room. In half a minute, everyone was asleep. Again, Daisy the cow awoke them with her mooing. It was strange to wake up in Willow House, instead of in their outdoor sleeping place among the gorse with the sky above them. The children blinked up at their green roof, for leaves were growing from the willow branches that were interlaced for a ceiling. It was dim inside Willow House. The door was shut, and there were no windows. Jack had thought it would be too difficult to make windows, and they might let in the wind and rain too much. So Willow House was rather dark and a bit stuffy when the door was shut, but nobody minded that. It really made it all the more exciting. The children ran out of Willow House and looked around, all except Nora. She lay lazily on her back, looking up at the green ceiling, thinking how soft the heather was and how nice Willow House smelt. She was always the last one out of bed.
"Nora, you won't have time for a dip before breakfast if you don't come now,"
shouted Peggy. So Nora ran out too. What a lovely morning it was! The thunderstorm had cleared away and left the world looking clean and newly washed. Even the pure blue sky seemed washed too. Splash! Into the lake they went. Mike and Jack could both swim. Jack swam like a fish. Peggy could swim a little way, and Nora hardly at all. Jack was teaching her, but she was a bit of a baby and wouldn't get her feet off the sandy bed of the lake. Peggy was first out of the water and went to get the breakfast. But when she looked round their little beach, she stood still in disgust.
"Look here," she cried. "Look, Nora, how those trippers have spoiled our beach."
They all ran out of the cold water, and, rubbing themselves down with their 2 towels, they stared round at their little beach, which was always such a beautiful place, clean and shining with its silvery sand. But now, what a difference! Orange peel lay everywhere. Banana skins, brown, slippery and soaked with rain, lay where they'd been thrown. A tin that had once had canned pears in, and 2 cardboard cartons that had been full of cream rolled about on the sand, empty. An empty cigarette packet joined the mess. The children felt really angry. The little beach was theirs, and they loved it. They'd been careful to keep it clean, tidy and lovely, and had always put everything away after a meal. Now some horrid trippers had come there just for one meal, and had left it looking like a rubbish heap.
"People that leave rubbish about in beautiful places like this are just rubbishy people themselves,"
cried Peggy fiercely, almost in tears. "I'll clear up the mess and burn it," said Mike. "Wait a minute," said Jack. "We might find some of the things useful."
"What? Old banana skins and orange peel?" cried Mike. "You're not thinking of making a pudding or something of them, Jack?"
"No," said Jack with a grin. "But if we keep the tin and a carton and the empty cigarette packet in our cave cupboard, we might put them out on the beach if anyone else ever comes. And then, if they happen to find the remains of our fire or a bit of string or anything like that, why, they won't think of looking for us. They'll just think trippers have been here."
"Good idea, Jack," cried everyone.
"You really are good at thinking out clever things," said Peggy, busy getting the fire going. She put some milk on to boil. She meant to make cocoa for them all to drink. Nora brought in 5 eggs for breakfast. Peggy fried them with 2 trout that Jack had caught on his useful lines. The smell was delicious. "I say, poor old Daisy must be milked," said Jack, gobbling down his breakfast and drinking his hot cocoa. Suddenly, Nora gave a squeal and pointed behind him. Jack turned, and to his great astonishment saw the cow walking towards him.
"You wouldn't go to milk her in time, so she has come to you," laughed Peggy. "Good old Daisy. Fancy her knowing the way."
There seemed quite a lot of jobs always waiting to be done each day on the island. I'll milk Daisy each morning and Mike can milk her in the evening, said Jack. Nora, you can look after the hens. It won't only be your job to feed them and give them water and collect the eggs, but you'll have to watch the fence round the hen yard carefully to see that the hens don't peck out the heather we stuffed into the fence to stop up the holes. We don't want to lose our hens.
What is Peggy going to do? Asked Nora.
Peggy had better do the odd jobs, said Jack. She can look after the fire, think of meals and tidy up. I'll see to my fishing lines, and every now and again one or other of us had better go to the top of the hill to see if any more trippers are coming. I'd better go and get the boat out from where I hid it under the overhanging bushes, hadn't I? Said Mike, finishing his cocoa. No, said Jack. It would be a good thing to keep it always hidden there, except when we need it. Now, I'm off to milk Daisy. Peggy began to clear away and wash up the dishes. Nora wanted to help her, but Peggy said she'd better go and feed the hens. So off she went, making the little clucking noise that the hens knew. They came rushing to her as she climbed over the fence of their little yard. Nora scattered the seed for them, and they gobbled it up. Then she took a look round the fence to see that it was all right. It seemed all right. The little girl didn't bother to look very hard, because she wanted to go off to the raspberry patch up on the hillside and see if there were any more wild raspberries ripe. She picked up a basket Peggy had made of thin twigs and set off.
Are you going to find raspberries, Nora?
Called Peggy.
Yes,
shouted Nora.
Well, bring back as many as you can, and we'll have them for pudding at dinner time with cream, shouted Peggy. Don't eat them all yourself.
Nora found a patch of raspberries that she hadn't seen yesterday, and there were a great many ripe. The little girl ate dozens, and then began to fill her basket with the sweet, juicy fruit. She sat down in the sun and leaned against a warm rock that jutted out from the hillside. She felt very happy indeed. The lake was as blue as a forget-me-not down below her. Nora lazed there in the sun until she heard Mike calling.
Nora! Nora! Wherever are you? You've been hours.
Coming,
cried Nora, and she made her way round the side of the hill, through the heather and bracken, and down to the beach where all the others were. Peggy had got the fire going well, and was cooking a rabbit that Jack had produced. "Where are the raspberries?" asked Jack. "Oh, you've got a basket full. Good. There'll be plenty for all of us." Soon they were eating their dinner. Peggy was certainly a good little cook. But nicest of all were the sweet, juicy raspberries with thick yellow cream poured all over them. "The hens are very quiet today," said Jack, finishing up the last of his cream. "I haven't heard a single cluck since we've been having dinner." "I suppose they're all right," said Peggy. "I'll go and have a look," said Mike. He put down his plate and went to the hen yard. He looked here and he looked there. He lifted up the sack that was stretched over one corner of the yard for shelter. But no hens were there.
Are they all right?
called Jack. Mike turned in dismay.
No, they're not here. They've gone.
Gone? They can't have gone. They must be there.
Well, they're not. They've completely vanished. Not even a cluck left.
All the children ran to the hen yard and gazed in amazement and fright at the empty space. "Do you suppose someone has been here and taken them?" asked Peggy. "No," said Jack sternly. "Look here." He pointed to a hole in the fence of the hen yard. "See that hole? They've all escaped through there, and now goodness knows where they are." "Well, I never heard them go," said Peggy. "I was the only one left here. They must have gone when I went to get water from the spring." "Then the hole must have been there when Nora fed the hens this morning," said Jack. "Nora, what do you mean by doing your job as badly as that? Didn't I tell you this morning that you were to look carefully round the fence each time the hens were fed to make sure it was safe? And now, the very first time, you let the hens escape. I'm ashamed of you." "You might do your bit, Nora," said Mike. "It's too bad of you." Nora began to cry, but the others had no sympathy for her. It was too big a disappointment to lose their hens. Nora cried more and more loudly, till Jack got really angry with her. "Stop that silly baby noise," he said. "Can't you help to look for the hens too?" You're not to talk to me like that, wept Nora. I shall talk to you how I like, said Jack. I'm the captain here, and you've got to do as you're told. If one of us is careless, we all suffer, and I won't have that. Stop crying, I tell you, and help to look for the hens. Nora started to hunt, but she didn't stop crying. Well, they're nowhere about here, said Jack at last. We'd better spread out and see if we can find them on the island somewhere. They may have wandered right to the other side. The children separated and went different ways, calling to the hens loudly. Nora went where Jack had pointed. She called to the hens too, but none came in answer. Wherever could they be? What a hunt there was that afternoon for those vanished hens. It really was astonishing that not one could be found. Nora grew more and more unhappy as the day passed. She felt that she really couldn't face the others if the hens were not found. She made a hidey-hole in the tall bracken and crouched there, watching the others returning to the camp for supper. They had had no tea and were hungry and thirsty. So was Nora, but nothing would make her go and join the others. Well, the hens are gone, said Mike as he joined Jack going down the hill to the beach. It's strange, said Jack. They can't have flown off the island, surely. They sat down by the fire whilst Peggy made some cocoa and doled out a rice pudding that she'd made. They wondered where Nora was. She'll be along soon, I expect, said Peggy. They ate their meal in silence, and then, oh, what a lovely sound came to their ears. Yes, it was and walking sedately down to the beach came all 6 hens. The children stared and stared and stared. Where have you been, you scamps? Cried Jack. We've looked for you everywhere. Said the hens. You knew it was your mealtime, so you've come for it, said Jack. I'll feed them, said Peggy. She threw them some corn and they pecked it up eagerly. Then they let Mike and Jack lift them into their mended yard and they settled down happily. We'd better tell Nora, said Jack. So they went up the hillside calling Nora. Nora! Nora! Where are you? But Nora didn't answer. She crouched lower in the bracken and hoped that no one would find her. But Jack came upon her suddenly and shouted cheerfully, Oh, there you are! The hens have all come back, Nora. They knew it was their mealtime, you see. Come and have your supper. We've kept some for you. Nora went with him to the beach. Peggy kissed her and said, Now don't worry any more, it's all right. We've got all the hens safely again. Had I better go and see to the hens each day, do you think, instead of Nora? Mike asked Jack. But Jack shook his head. No, he said. That's Nora's job, and you'll see. She'll do it splendidly now, won't you, Nora? Yes, I will, Jack, said Nora, eating her rice pudding and feeling much happier. But what I'd like to know, said Peggy, as she and Nora washed the dirty things, is where did those hens manage to hide themselves so cleverly? The children soon knew, for when, in a little while, Mike went to fetch something from Willow House, he saw 3 shining eggs in the heather there. He picked them up and ran back to the others. Those cunning hens walked into Willow House and hid there, he cried, holding up the eggs. Well, 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 said Jack in surprise. And to think how we hunted all over the island, and those rascally hens were nearby all the time. The days slipped past, and the children grew used to their happy, carefree life on the island. Jack and Mike went off in the boat one night and fetched the old milking pail from Aunt Harriet's farm and a load of vegetables from the garden. Now it was easy to milk Daisy, for they had a proper pail. When Jack or Mike had milked Daisy, they stood the pail of milk in the middle of the little spring that gushed out from the hillside and ran down to the lake below. The icy cold water kept the milk cool. It did not turn sour, even on the hottest day. Jack got out the packets of seeds he had brought from his grandfather's farm and showed them to the others. Look, he said, here are lettuce seeds
and radish seeds, and mustard and cress, and runner beans. It's late to plant the beans, but in the good soil on this island, I dare say they'll grow quickly, and we shall have a crop later in the year." "The mustard and cress and radish will grow very quickly," said Peggy. "What fun! The lettuces won't be very long either in this hot weather, if we keep them well watered." "Where shall we plant them?" asked Mike. "Well, we better plant them in little patches in different corners of the island," said Jack. "If we dig out a big patch and have a sort of vegetable garden, and anyone comes here to look for us, they will see our garden and know someone's here. But if we just plant out tiny patches, we can easily throw heather over them if we see anyone coming." "Jack's always full of good ideas," said Nora. "I'll help to dig and plant." "We'll all do it," said Jack. So together they hunted for good places and dug up the ground there and planted their precious seeds. It was Peggy's job to water them each day and see that no weeds choked the seeds when they grew. One day Jack said they must explore the caves in the hillside. "If anyone does come here to look for us, and it's quite likely," he said, "we must really have all our plans made as to what to do and know exactly where to hide. People who are really looking for us won't just sit about on the beach as the trippers did, you know. They'll hunt all over the island." "Well, let's go and explore the cave today," said Mike. "I'll get the lantern." So, with the lantern swinging in his hand and a box of matches ready in his pocket to light it, Jack led the way to the caves. The children had found 3 openings into the hillside, one where the hens had been put, another larger one, and a third very tiny one through which they could hardly crawl. "We'll go in through the biggest entrance," said Jack. He lighted the lantern and went into the dark cave. It seemed strange to leave the hot July sunshine. Nora shivered, but she didn't say anything, only kept very close to Mike. Jack swung the lantern round and lit up all the corners. It was a large cave, but not of much use for hiding in, for every corner could easily be seen. Mike went all round the walls, peeping and prying, and right at the very back of the cave he discovered a curious thing. The wall was split from about 6 feet downwards, and a big crack about 2 feet across yawned there. At first it seemed as if the crack simply showed rock behind it, but it didn't. There was a narrow, winding passage there, half hidden by a jutting-out piece of rock. "Look here!" cried Mike in excitement. "Here's a passage right in the very rock of the hillside itself. Come on, Jack, bring your lantern here. I wonder if it goes very far back." Jack lifted up his lantern and walked a little way down the passage. "Come on," he cried. "It's all right. The air smells fresh here and the passage seems to lead to somewhere." The children crowded after him in excitement. The passage was sometimes very narrow, but quite passable. And at last it ended, and Jack found that it led to an even larger cave right in the very middle of the hill itself. He lifted his lantern and looked around. The air smelt fresh and sweet. Why was that? "Look!" cried Nora, pointing upwards. "I can see daylight." Sure enough, a long way up, a spot of bright daylight came through into the dark cave. From the big cave, a low passage led to another cave on the right. This passage was so low that the children had to crawl through it, and to their surprise they found that this second cave led out to the hillside itself, and was no other than the cave into which it was so hard to crawl because of the small entrance. "Well, we're getting on," said Jack. "We've discovered that the big cave we knew leads by a passage to an even bigger one, and from that big one we can get into this smaller one, which has an opening onto the hillside, and that opening is too small for any grown-up to get into." "What about the cave we put the hens into?" asked Nora. "That must just be a little separate cave by itself," said Jack. They came out and sat on the hillside in the bright sunshine. It was lovely to sit there in the warmth after the cold, dark caves. "Now listen," said Jack thoughtfully. "Those caves are going to be jolly useful to us this summer, if anyone comes to get us."
We could get Daisy into that big inner cave quite well, for one thing. Oh, Jack, she'd never squeeze through that narrow winding passage, said Peggy. Oh, yes, she would, said Jack. She'd come with me all right. And what's more, Daisy is going to practice going in and out there, so that if the time comes when she has really got to hide for a few hours, she won't mind. It wouldn't be any good putting her into that cave and then having her moo fit to lift the top off the hill. Everyone laughed. Mike nodded his head. Quite right, he said. Daisy will have to practice. I suppose the hens can go there quite well too. Easily, said Jack, and so can we. I almost wish someone would come, said Peggy. It would be so exciting to hide away. A bit too exciting, said Jack. Remember, there's a lot to be done as soon as we see anyone coming. Hadn't we better plan it all out now, said Mike. Then we shall each know what to do. Yes, said Jack. Well, I'll manage Daisy the cow and go straight off to fetch her. Mike, you manage the hens and get them into a sack and take them straight up to the cave. Peggy, you stamp out the fire and scatter the hot sticks. Also, you must put out the empty cigarette packet, the tin and the cardboard carton that the trippers left, so that it will look as if trippers have been here, and no one will think it's funny to find the remains of a fire. And what shall I do? Asked Nora. You must go to the spring and take the pail of milk from there to the cave, said Jack. Before you do that, scatter heather over our patches of growing seeds. Oh, and Peggy, you might make certain the cave cupboard is hidden by a curtain of bracken or something. Aye, aye, Captain, said Peggy. Now we've all got our duties to do, but you've got the hardest, Jack. I wouldn't like to hide Daisy away down that narrow passage. What will you do if she gets stuck? She won't get stuck, said Jack. She's not as fat as all that. By the way, we'd better put a cup or two in the cave and some heather in case we have to hide up for a good many hours. We can drink milk then and have somewhere soft to lie on. Those caves will be cosy to live in the winter time, said Peggy. We could live in the outer one and store our things in the inner one. We should be quite protected from bad weather. How lucky we are, said Nora. A nice house made of trees for the summer and a cosy cave home for the winter. Winter's a long way off yet, said Jack. Oh, I say, I'm hungry. What about frying some eggs, Peggy, and sending Mike to get some raspberries? Come on, shouted Peggy, and raced off down the hillside, glad to leave behind the dark, gloomy caves. No one came to disturb the children. They lived together on the island, playing, working, eating, drinking, bathing, doing just as they liked, and yet having to do certain duties in order to keep their farmyard going properly. Jack got a good deal of fruit and a regular amount of potatoes and turnips from his grandfather's farm, which still had not been sold. There was always enough to eat, for there were eggs, rabbits and fish, and Daisy gave them more than enough milk to drink. Their seeds grew quickly. It was a proud day when Peggy was able to cut the first batch of mustard and cress and the first lettuce and mix it up into a salad to eat with hard-boiled eggs. The runner beans were now well up to the top of the bramble bushes, and Jack nipped the tips off so that they would flower well below. Although life was peaceful on the island, it had its excitements. Each week, Jack solemnly led poor Daisy to the cave and made her squeeze through the narrow passage into the cave beyond. The first time she made a terrible fuss. She mooed and bellowed and struggled and even kicked, but Jack was firm and kind and led her inside. There, in the inner cave, he gave her a juicy turnip, fresh pulled from his grandfather's farm the night before. Daisy was pleased. She chewed it all up and was quite good when she was led back through the passage once more. The second time she made a fuss again, but did not kick, nor did she bellow quite so loudly. The third time she seemed quite pleased to go, because she knew by now that a fine turnip awaited her in the cave. The fourth time she even went into the cave by herself and made her way solemnly to the passage at the far end. July passed into August. The weather was thundery and hot. 2 or 3 thunderstorms came along, and the children slept in Willow House for a few nights. The blackberries grew ripe on the bushes that rambled all over the place, and the children's mouths were always stained with them, for they picked them as they went about their various jobs. Nuts were ripening too, but were not yet ready. Jack looked at the heavy clusters on the hazel trees and longed for them to be ripe. He went to have a look at the beans. They were ready to be picked. The runners grew up the brambles, and the long green pods were mixed up with the blackberry flowers and berries.
"Beans for dinner today," shouted Jack.
He went to fetch one of the many baskets that Peggy knew how to weave from willow twigs, and soon had it full of the juicy green beans. Another time Jack remembered the mushrooms that used to grow in the field at the end of his grandfather's farm. He and Mike set off in the boat one early morning at the end of August to see if they could find some. "Mushrooms," said Jack in delight, pointing to where 2 or 3 grew. "Look, fresh new ones, only grown up last night. Come on, fill the sack." In half an hour their sack was full, and they slipped away through the sunny fields to where they had moored their boat. "What a breakfast we'll have," grinned Jack. And they did. Fried mushrooms and fried eggs, wild strawberries and cream. Nora learnt to swim well. She and Peggy practised every day in the lake, till Jack said they were as good as he and Mike were. Then there came a spell of bad weather, just a few days. The island seemed very different then, with the sun gone, a soft rain mist driving over it, soaking everything, and the lake water as cold as ice. They were rather bored when they had to keep indoors in Willow House when it rained. They had read all their books and papers by that time, and although it was fun to play games for a while, they couldn't do it all day long. Peggy didn't mind. She always had plenty of mending to do. She showed the boys and Nora how to weave baskets. They needed a great many, for the baskets did not last very long, and there were always raspberries, strawberries, or blackberries to pick. Then the sun came back again, and the children lay about in it and basked in the hot rays to get themselves warm once more. The hens fluffed out their wet feathers and clucked happily. Daisy came out from under the tree which gave her shelter, and gave soft moos of pleasure. The world was full of colour again, and the children shouted for joy. One day there was a great alarm, because Nora said she had heard the splashing of oars. Jack rushed off to get Daisy, and Mike bundled the hens into a sack. But as nothing more seemed to happen, Peggy ran to the top of the hill and looked down the lake. No boat was in sight, only 4 big white swans quarrelling amongst themselves and splashing the water with their feet and wings.
"It's all right, boys," she shouted. "It's only the swans. It isn't a boat."
So Daisy was left in peace, and the hens were emptied out of the sack again. Nora was teased, and made up her mind that she would make quite certain it was a boat next time she gave the alarm. The summer passed away. The days grew gradually shorter. The children found that it was not always warm enough to sit by the campfire in the evenings, and they went to Willow House, where they could light the lantern and play games. Willow House was always cosy. One day Mike got a shock. He went to get another candle for the lantern, and found that there was only one left. "I say, Jack, we've only got 1 candle left." "Oh, we'll have to get some more then." "How?" asked Mike. "They don't grow on trees." "Jack means he'll go and get some from somewhere," said Peggy, who was mending a hole in Jack's shirt. "But where could he get candles, except in a shop?" said Mike. "Well, I've been thinking," said Jack seriously. "I've been thinking very hard. The autumn is coming, and we shall need a better light in the evening. We shall need another blanket too, and there are all sorts of little things we want." "I badly want some more mending wool and some black cotton," said Peggy. "And I'll have to have some more corn for the hens soon," said Nora. "And it would be nice if we could get some flour," said Peggy. "I just long for bread, don't you?" "It would be nice," said Jack. "Well, listen, everyone. Don't you think it would be a good idea
if I took the boat and went to the village at the other end of the lake and bought some of the things we badly need?" The others all cried out in surprise. "But what about money, Jack?" said Peggy. "I'd thought of that," said Jack. "If Mike will help me to pick a sackful of mushrooms early one morning, I could bring them back here, arrange them in the willow baskets we make, and then take them to the village to sell. With the money I get, I'll buy the things we want." "Oh, that is a good idea, Jack," said Peggy. "If only you don't get caught." "Oh, don't worry about that, silly," said Jack. "Now, we better make out a list of things we want, and I'll try and get them when I go." "I wish we could have a book or two," said Peggy. "And a pencil would be nice," said Nora. "I like drawing things." "And a new kettle," said Peggy. "Ours leaks a bit now." "And a few more nails," said Mike. "And the flour and the wool and the black cotton," said Peggy. So they went on, making up a list of things that they would like to have. Jack said them all over and counted them up so that he wouldn't forget them. "Mike and I will get the mushrooms from the field over the water tomorrow morning," he said. "And I say, Jack, do you suppose you could sell some wild strawberries if you took them?" asked Nora eagerly. "That's a splendid idea," said Jack, pleased. "Look here, we'll make lots of little baskets today, and then we'll arrange the mushrooms and strawberries neatly in them, and I'll take them in the boat to sell. We should make a lot of money." Soon all 4 children were sitting on the sunny hillside among the heather, weaving the baskets. The boys were as good at it as the girls now, and by the time the sun was sinking, there was a fine array of baskets. Peggy counted them. There were 27. "I say, if we can fill and sell all those, Jack, you'll have plenty of money to buy everything," said Mike. The children went to bed early, for they knew they would have to be up at dawn the next day. They awoke just as the daylight was putting a sheet of silver over the eastern sky. They all got up and had their dip in the lake. Peggy thought of one more thing they wanted, a bar of soap. Their one piece was finished, and it was difficult to rub dirt off with sand, which they had to do now they had no soap. Jack added that to the list in his mind. That made 21 things wanted. What a lot! "Mike and I won't be very long picking mushrooms," he said, as he got into the boat and pushed off. "You and Nora go and pick the strawberries, Peggy. Have a kettle boiling on the fire when we come back so that we can have something hot to drink. It's rather chilly this morning." The girls filled 12 of the rush baskets and then went back to light the campfire. It was soon burning well, and Peggy hung the kettle over the flames to boil. Nora went to feed the hens. "I'll milk Daisy, I think," said Peggy. "It is getting about milking time, and the boys won't have time this morning. Watch the fire, Nora, and take the kettle off when it boils." Soon the boys were back, happy to show the girls such a fine collection of white mushrooms. Peggy had finished milking Daisy, and there was soon hot tea for everyone. The tin of cocoa had long been finished and was added to the list that Jack had in his mind. Whilst the boys were having breakfast of fried eggs and mushrooms, with a few wild strawberries and cream to follow, the 2 girls were busy arranging the fine mushrooms in the willow baskets, which were bigger and stronger than the rush strawberry ones. There were more than enough to fill the baskets. Peggy and Nora carried the full baskets carefully to the boat. They put them safely at the far end and covered them with elder leaves so that the flies wouldn't get at them. The boys set off in the boat. It had been arranged that they should both go to the far end of the lake, but that only Jack should go to sell their goods and to shop. One boy alone would not be so much noticed. Mike was to wait in the boat, hidden somewhere by the lakeside, till Jack returned. "Here's a good place to put the boat," said Jack, as he and Mike rowed up the lake and came in sight of the village at the far end. An alder tree leaned over the water by the lakeside, and Mike guided the boat there. It slid under the drooping tree, and Jack jumped out. "I can easily find my way to the village from here," he said. "I'll be as quick as I can, Mike." Jack had 2 long sticks, and on them he threaded the handles of the baskets of mushrooms and strawberries.
In this way he could carry them easily without spilling anything. Off he went with his goods through the wood, and Mike settled down in the boat to wait for his return. Jack was not long in finding the road that led to the little village, and to his great delight he found that it was market day there. A small market was held every Wednesday. Good, thought Jack. I shall not be so much noticed if there's a crowd of people, and I should be able to sell my goods easily. The boy went to the little marketplace, calling, "Fine mushrooms, ripe wild strawberries," at the top of his voice. When people saw the neat and pretty baskets of mushrooms and strawberries, they stopped to look at them. Certainly they were excellent goods, and very soon Jack was selling them fast. Shillings and sixpences clinked into his pocket, and Jack felt very happy. At last his sticks held no more baskets. The people praised him for his goods and the cleverly woven baskets, and told him to come again. Jack made up his mind that he would. He went shopping. He bought a very large bag of flour. He bought wool and cotton for Peggy. He bought scores of candles and plenty of matches. He bought a new kettle and 2 enamel plates. Peggy was always wishing she had more dishes. He bought some storybooks and 2 pencils and a rubber. A drawing book was added to his collection, some nails, soap, butter for a treat, some bars of chocolate, some tins of cocoa, tea, rice. Oh, Jack had a load to carry before he had done. When he could carry no more, and his money was all gone, he staggered off to the boat. Mike was waiting for him impatiently. He was delighted to see Jack and helped him to dump the things into the boat. Then off they rowed, home to the secret island. What fun it was that evening, unpacking all the things Jack had bought. Mike helped Jack to take everything to the beach, and Nora and Peggy jumped up and down and squealed with excitement. "Oh, Jack, isn't it all exciting?" cried Peggy. "Look here, shall we have supper now and look at all the things again afterwards and then put them away carefully? You and Mike will have to put up shelves in Willow House for all these new stores." Talking all at once and at the tops of their voices, the children set to work to get supper. This was a rabbit stew with runner beans picked by Nora and a baked potato each, with raspberries and cream afterwards. And as a special treat, Jack gave everyone half a bar of the precious chocolate. After supper, they cleared away and washed the dishes and then stamped out the fire. They took everything to Willow House and lighted the lantern that hung from the roof. Jack also lighted a candle to make enough light to see clearly all the treasures he had bought. He had really shopped very well. He had even bought a tin of treacle, so that sometimes, for a treat, Peggy could make toffee. He had got sugar too, which would be nice in their tea and cocoa. Their own sugar had been finished long ago. "And we needn't be too careful now of all our things," said Jack, "because I can go each week and sell mushrooms and strawberries and earn money to buy more." "But what will you do when the mushrooms and strawberries are over?" asked Peggy. "Then there'll be blackberries and nuts," said Jack. "They won't fetch so much money, but at any rate I can get enough to store up plenty of things for the winter. If we can get flour, potatoes, rice, cocoa and things like that, we shall be quite all right. Daisy can always give us milk and cream, and we get lots of eggs from the hens, fish from the lake, and a rabbit or 2. We are really very lucky." For 3 or 4 weeks Jack went to market, sold all his goods, and bought a great many stores for the winter. As the weeks went by, there were not so many wild strawberries to be found. Mushrooms stopped growing in the field, and the other market goods had to take their place. The children went nutting in the hazel trees and struck down great clusters of ripe nuts, lovely in their ragged green coats and brown shells. The girls picked baskets of big ripe blackberries, and Jack took these to the market instead of mushrooms and strawberries. People soon got to know him at the market. They wondered where he came from, but Jack never told them anything about himself. "I just live by the lakeside," he said when people asked him where he lived. One day, for the first time, Jack saw a policeman in the village. Jack's heart sank. Could the policeman have been told that a strange boy was about,
And could he be wondering if the boy was one of the lost children? Jack began to edge away, though his baskets of nuts and blackberries were only half sold.
"Hey, you!"
called the policeman suddenly.
"Where'd you come from, boy?"
"From the lakeside, where I've been gathering blackberries and nuts to sell," said Jack, not coming near the policeman.
"Is your name Mike?"
said the policeman. "No, that's not my name," said Jack, looking very innocent. "Buy some nuts, Mr. Policeman?" "No," said the policeman, getting a strip of paper out of his pocket and looking at a photograph there. "Come you here, my lad. I think you're one of the runaway children. Let's have a look at you." Jack turned pale. If the policeman had a picture of him, he was caught. Quick as lightning, the boy flung down the 2 sticks on which he had a dozen or so baskets strung and darted off through the crowd that had gathered. Hands were put out to stop him, but he struggled away, tearing his jacket, but not caring for anything but to escape. He slipped round a corner and into a garden. He darted round the cottage there and peered into the back garden. There was no one there, but there was a little hen house at the side. Jack made up his mind quickly. He opened the door of the hen house, slipped inside, and crouched down in the straw there, hardly daring to breathe. There were no hens there. Jack heard the sound of shouting and running feet, and he knew that people were looking for him. The running feet went by. The shouting died down. No one had seen him. Jack let out a big breath and his heart thumped loudly. He was really frightened. He stayed in the hen house all day long. He didn't dare to move out. He was hungry and thirsty and very cramped, but he knew quite well that if he slipped out, he might be seen. The hen house didn't smell nice, and Jack felt miserable as he sat there on the floor. He knew that by running away, he had as good as told the policeman that he was one of the runaways. And now the whole countryside would be searched again, and the secret island would probably be explored too. But if I hadn't run away, the policeman would have caught me and made me tell where the others were, thought the boy. Oh, if only I can get back to where Mike is waiting with the boat and get safely back to the island, we can make preparations to hide everything. When it was dark, Jack opened the door and slipped out. He stood listening. Not a sound was to be heard except the voices of people in the kitchen of the cottage nearby. He ran quietly down the path to the gate. He slipped out into the road and then ran for his life to the road that led to the wood by the lakeside where Mike was waiting. But would Mike be waiting there? Jack forgot his hunger and thirst as he padded along at top speed to where he had left Mike. No one saw him. It was a dark night, for the moon was not yet up. Jack made his way through the trees to the lakeside. And then his heart leapt for joy. He heard Mike's voice. "Is that you, Jack? What a time you've been! Whatever's happened?" Jack scrambled into the boat, panting. "Push off quickly, Mike. I was nearly caught today, and if anyone sees us, we shall all be discovered." Mike pushed off, his heart sinking. He could not bear the idea of being caught and sent back to his uncle's farm. He waited till Jack had got back his breath, and then asked him a few questions. Jack told him everything. "Oh, this is the end of my marketing," said Jack gloomily. "I shan't dare to show my nose again in any village. They'll all be on the lookout for me. Why can't people run away if they want to? We're not doing any harm, only living happily together on our secret island." After a bit, Jack helped Mike to row, and they arrived at the island just as the moon was rising. The girls were on the beach by a big fire, waiting anxiously for them. "Oh, Jack! Oh, Mike!" cried Nora, hugging them both. "We thought you were never coming. We felt sure you'd been caught." "I jolly nearly was," said Jack. "Where is your shopping?" asked Peggy. "Haven't got any," said Jack. "I'd only sold a few baskets when a policeman spotted me. I've got the money for the ones I sold, but what's the good of money on an island where you can't buy anything?" Soon Jack had told the girls his story. He sat by the fire, warming himself and drinking a cup of hot cocoa. He was dreadfully hungry too, for he had had nothing to eat all day. He ate a whole rice pudding, 2 fishes and a hard-boiled egg whilst he talked. Everyone was very grave and solemn. Nora was really scared. She tried her hardest not to cry, but Jack heard her sniffing and put his arm round her. "Oh, don't be a baby," he said. "Things may not be so bad after all. We have our plans laid. Let's go to bed and talk tomorrow." And so to bed in Willow House they went. They did not get to sleep for a long time because first one and then another of them would say something or ask a question, and then the talking would all begin again. "Now, nobody is to say another word," said Jack at last in his firmest voice. "Aye, aye, Captain," said everyone sleepily, and not another word was spoken. In the morning the children awoke early. Peggy solemnly got the breakfast. Jack went off to milk the cow. Mike got some water from the spring, and Nora fed the hens. It was not a very cheerful party that sat down to breakfast. When the things were cleared away, the children held a meeting. "The first thing to do," said Jack, "is to arrange that someone shall always be on watch during the day, on the top of the hill." "Shall we have someone on guard during the night?" asked Nora. "No," said Jack. "People are not likely to come at night." "I think we had better make a big hole in the boat and let her sink," said Mike. "I've always been afraid she might be found, although she is well hidden under the brambles. After all, Jack, if she is sunk, no one could possibly find her." "That's a good idea, Mike," said Jack. "Sink her this morning. We can easily get her up again and mend her if we want her. Peggy, will you see that every single thing is cleared away that might show people we're here? Look, there's some snippings of wool there." "I'll see to it," promised Peggy. Jack knew she would, for she was a most dependable girl. "Every single thing must be taken to the caves today," said Jack, "except just those few things we need for cooking. We can easily slip those away at the last minute." "Jack, what about the hen yard?" asked Nora. "It really does look like a yard now because the hens have scratched about so much." That's true," said Jack. "Well, as soon as we know we've got to hide, Mike can pull up the fence round the hen yard and store it in Willow House. Then he can scatter sand over the yard and cover it with heather. It's a good thing you thought of that, Nora." "What about someone hopping up to the hilltop now?" said Mike. "The sun's getting high. We ought to keep a watch from now on." "Yes, we ought," said Jack. "You take first watch, Mike. We'll take it in turns all day long. Keep watch all round. We don't know from which end of the lake a boat might come, though it's more likely to be from the end I was at yesterday." Mike sped up the hill and sat down there. The lake lay blue below him. Not a swan, not a moorhen disturbed its surface. Certainly no boat was in sight. Mike settled down to watch carefully. The others were busy. Everything was taken up to the caves in the hillside and stored there. Nora left a sack by the hen yard, ready to bundle the hens into when the time came. She also put a pile of sand by the yard, ready for Mike to scatter after the fences had been pulled up. Nora was no longer the careless little girl she had been, nor was she lazy any more. After a while, Jack went up to take Mike's place on the hilltop. Mike set to work to sink the boat. Peggy went hunting round looking for anything that might give them away. She didn't find very much, for all the children tied it up after any meal or game. Broken eggshells were always buried, uneaten food was given to the hens, and it was only things like snippings of wool or cotton that the wind had blown away that could be found. Peggy went on guard next, and then Nora. It was dull work, sitting up on the hilltop doing nothing but watch, so Nora took her pencil and drawing book and drew what she could see. That made the time go quickly. Peggy took her mending. She always had plenty of that to do, for every day somebody tore their clothes on brambles. After every stitch, Peggy looked up and down the lake, but nothing could be seen. The next day the children kept watch in turn again, and the next. The third day, when Nora was on guard, she thought she saw people on the far side of the lake where a thick wood grew. She whistled softly to Jack, and he came up and watched too. Yes, you're right, Nora," he said at last. "There are people there, and they are certainly hunting for something, or someone."
They watched for a while, and then they called the others. There was no fire going, for Peggy had stamped it out. They all crowded onto the hilltop, their heads peeping out of the tall bracken that grew there.
"See over there," said Jack. "The hunt is on. It will only be a day or two before they come over here."
"Well, everything is ready," said Peggy. "I wish they'd come soon, if they are coming. I hate all this waiting about. It gives me a cold feeling in my tummy." "So it does in mine," said Mike. "I'd like a hot water bottle to carry about with me." That made everyone laugh. They watched for a while longer, and then went down, leaving Jack on guard. For 2 days nothing happened, though the children thought they could see people on the other side of the lake, beating about in the bushes and hunting. Mike went on guard in the morning and kept a keen watch. Nora fed the hens as usual, and Jack milked Daisy. And then Mike saw something. It was a boat. No mistaking it this time. A boat it was, and a big one too. Mike called the others, and they scrambled up.
"Yes," said Jack at once. "That's a boat all right, with about 4 people in too. Come on, there's no time to be lost. There's only one place a boat can come to here, and that's our island. To your jobs, everyone, and don't be frightened."
The children hurried off. Jack went to get Daisy, Mike went to see to the hens and the hen yard, Peggy scattered the dead remains of the fire and caught up the kettle and the saucepan and any odds and ends of food on the beach to take to the cave. Nora ran to cover up their patches of growing seeds with bits of heather. Would they have time to do everything? Would they be well hidden before the boatload of people came to land on their secret island? Now that people had really come at last to search the island, the children were glad to carry out their plans, for the days of waiting had been very upsetting. Daisy, the cow, did not seem a bit surprised to have Jack leading her to the inner cave again, and went like a lamb, without a single moo. Jack got her safely through the narrow passage to the inner cave, and left her there munching a turnip, whilst he went to see if he could help the others. Mike arrived with the hens just then, and Jack gave him a hand. The hens didn't like being pulled through the tiny passage and squawked dismally. But when Mike shook them out of the sack and scattered grain for them to eat, they were quite happy again. Jack had lighted the lantern in the inner cave, and it cast its dim light down. Mike thought he'd better stay in the cave in case the hens found their way out again. So he sat down, his heart thumping, and waited for the others. One by one they came, carrying odds and ends. Each child had done his or her job, and with scarlet cheeks and beating hearts, they sat down together in the cave and looked at one another.
"They're not at the island yet," said Jack. "I took a look just now. They've got another 1/4 mile to go. Now, is there anything we can possibly have forgotten?"
The children thought hard. The boat was sunk, the cow and the hens were in, the fire was out and well scattered, the hen yard was covered with sand and heather, the yard fence was taken up and stored in Willow House, the seed patches were hidden, the milk pail was taken from the spring.
"We've done everything,"
said Peggy. And then Mike jumped up in a fright.
"My hat," he said. "Where is it? I haven't got it on. I must have left it somewhere."
The others stared at him in dismay.
"It might be the one thing that gives us away," said Jack. "There's just time to go and look for it," said Mike. "I'll go and see if I can find it."
He crawled through the narrow passage and out into the sunlight. He could see the boat from where he was, being rowed through the water some distance away. He ran down the hill to the beach. He hunted there. He hunted round about the hen yard. He hunted by the spring. He hunted everywhere. But he could not find that hat. And then he wondered if it was anywhere near Willow House, for he'd gone there that morning to store the hen yard fences. He squeezed through the thickly growing trees and went to Willow House. There, beside the doorway, was his hat. The boy pushed it into his pocket and made his way back up the hillside. Just as he got to the cave entrance, he heard the boat grinding on the beach below. The searchers had arrived. He crawled into the big inner cave. The others greeted him excitedly.
"Did you find it, Mike?"
"Yes, thank goodness," said Mike, taking his hat out of his pocket. "The boat is on the beach now, Jack. I heard it being pulled in. There are 4 men in it."
"I'm just a bit worried about the passage to this inner cave from the outer cave," said Jack. "If that is found, it's all up with us." I was wondering if we could find a few rocks and stones and pile them up halfway through the passage so that if anyone does come through there, he'll find his way blocked and won't guess there's another cave behind where we are hiding." "That's a fine idea, Jack," said Mike. "Come on, everyone. Find rocks and stones and hard clods of earth and stop up the passage halfway through." The children worked hard, and before half an hour had gone by, the passage was completely blocked up. No one could possibly guess there was a way through. It would be quite easy to unblock when the time came to go out. "I'm going to crawl through to the cave with the small entrance and peep out to see if I can hear anything," said Jack. So he crawled through and sat just inside the tiny low-down entrance, trying to hear. The men were certainly searching the island. Jack could hear their shouts easily.
"Someone's been here," shouted one man. "Look where they've made a fire." "Trippers, probably," called back another man. "There's an empty tin here too, and a carton. Just the sort of thing trippers leave about." "Hey, look at this spring here," called another voice. "Looks to me as if people have been tramping about here." "Well, if those children are here, we'll find them all right," said a fourth voice. "It beats me how they could manage to live here, though, all alone, with no food except what that boy could buy in the village."
The hunt went on. Nothing seemed to be found. The children had cleared everything up very well indeed. But as Jack sat just inside the cave, there came a shout from someone near the beach.
"Just look here! What do you make of this?"
Jack wondered whatever the man had found. He soon knew. The man had kicked aside the heather that had hidden the henyard and had found the newly scattered sand.
"This looks as if something had been going on here," said the man. "But goodness knows what. You know, I think those children are here somewhere." "We'd better beat through the bushes and the bracken," said another man. "That'd be the likeliest place."
Then Jack heard the men beating through the bracken, poking into every bush, trying their hardest to find a hidden child. But not one could they find. Jack crawled back to the cave after 2 or 3 hours and told the others what had happened. They listened, alarmed to hear that the henyard had been discovered, even though they had tried so hard to hide it. "It's time we had something to eat," said Peggy. They sat and ate, though none of them felt hungry. When the meal was over, Jack went back to his post again. He sat just inside the cave entrance and listened. The men were getting puzzled and disheartened. They were sitting at the foot of the hill, eating sandwiches and drinking beer. Jack could hear their voices quite plainly. "Well, those children may have been on this island, and I think they were, but they're not here now," said one man. "I'm certain of that." "We've hunted every inch," said another man. "I think you're right, Tom. Those kids have been here all right. Who else could have planted those runner beans we found? But they've gone off in the boat." "Ah, yes, the boat," said the third man. "Now, if the children were here, we'd find a boat, wouldn't we? Well, we haven't found one, so they can't be here." "There's just one place we haven't looked," said the quiet voice of the fourth man. "There are some caves in this hillside. It's possible those children may have hidden there." "Caves?" said another man. "Yes, just the place. We'll certainly look there. Where are they?" "I'll show you in a minute," said the fourth man. "Got a torch?" "No, but I've got plenty of matches," said the other man. "But look here. They can't be there if there's no boat anywhere to be seen. If they are here, there must be a boat somewhere." "It's possible for a boat to be sunk so that no searcher could find it," said the fourth man. "Oh, children would never think of that," said another. "Come on," said a man. "We'll go to those caves now, but it's a waste of time. I don't think the children are within miles. They've gone off up the lakeside somewhere in their boat." Jack crawled silently back to the inner cave, his heart thumping badly. "They don't think we're on the island," he whispered, "because they haven't found the boat. But they're coming to explore the caves. Now put out the lantern, Mike. Everyone must keep as quiet as a mouse. Is Daisy lying down? Good. The hens are quiet enough too. They seem to think it's night and are roosting in a row. Now, nobody must sneeze or cough. Everything depends on the next hour or two. Not a sound was to be heard in the big inner cave. Daisy lay like a log, breathing quietly. The hens roosted peacefully. The children sat like mice. And then they heard the men coming into the cave outside. Matches were struck, and the passage that led to their cave was found.
"Look here, Tom," said a voice. "Here's what looks like a passage. Shall we see where it goes?" "We'd better, I suppose," said a voice.
And then there came the sound of footsteps down the blocked-up passage. The children sat in the inner cave as though they were turned into stone. They could hear the sound of someone fumbling his way along the narrow passage. He came right up to the place where the children had piled rocks, stones, and earth to block up the passage.
"I say," the man called back to the others, "the passage ends here in what looks like loose rocks. Shall I try and force my way through?" "No," cried another man. "If you can't get through, the children couldn't. Oh, this is a wild goose chase. We'll never find the children in these caves. Come back, Tom."
The man turned himself round with difficulty and began to squeeze back. And at that very moment a dreadful thing happened. Daisy the cow let out a terrific moo. The children were not expecting it, and they almost jumped out of their skins with fright. Then they clutched at one another, expecting the men to come chasing along at once, having heard Daisy. There was an astonished silence. Then one of the men said, "Did you hear that?"
"Of course," said another. "What in the wide world was it?" "Well, it wasn't the children, that's certain," said the first with a laugh. "I never in my life heard a child make a noise like that." "It sounded like a cow," said another voice. "A cow?" cried the first man. "What next? Do you mean to say you think there's a cow in the middle of this hill, Tom?" "Of course there can't be," said Tom, laughing, "but it sounded mighty like one. Let's listen and see if we hear anything again."
There was a silence, as if the men were listening, and at that moment Daisy most obligingly gave a dreadful hollow cough that echoed mournfully round and round the cave.
"I don't like it," said a man's voice. "It sounds too queer for anything. Let's get out of these dark caves into the sunshine. I'm perfectly certain, since we heard those noises, that no children would be inside those caves. Why, they'd be frightened out of their lives."
Jack squeezed Nora's hand in delight. So old Daisy had frightened the men. What a glorious joke! There was the sound of scrambling about in the outer cave, and then it seemed as if the men were all outside again.
"We'd better just hunt about and see if there are any more caves," said one man. "Look, that seems like one." "No one could get in there except a rabbit," said a voice. "Children could," said another. "Now look here, Tom. If we find children on this island now, I'll eat my hat," said the first man. "There's no boat to begin with, and we really haven't found anything except runner beans, which might have been dropped by birds, and a funny sort of sandy yard. And you can't tell me children are clever enough to live here day after day and yet vanish completely, leaving no trace behind as soon as we come. No, 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 no. Children are not as clever as that."
"I think you're right," said Tom. "Come on, let's go. I'm tired of this island with its strange noises. Where those children have gone just beats me. Oh, I wish we could find them. There's such a surprise waiting for them." The voices grew distant as the men went down the hill to the beach where they'd put their boat. Jack crept quietly through the low passage into the small cave with the tiny entrance. He put his ear down to the entrance and listened. The sound of voices floated up to him. He heard the sound of oars being put ready. He heard the sound of the boat being pushed onto the water. And then came the sound of splashing.
"They're going," he called. "They really are."
The others crowded round Jack. Then, when he thought it was safe, they all squeezed out of the tiny cave entrance and crept out onto the hillside. Well hidden in the tall bracken, they watched the boatful of men being rowed away, away, away. The splashing of the oars and the men's voices came clearly to the 4 children as they stood there. Nora suddenly began to cry. The excitement had been so great, and she'd been so brave. that now she felt as if she must cry and cry and cry. And then Peggy began, and even Mike and Jack felt their eyes getting wet. This was dreadful. But, oh, it was such a glorious feeling to know that they had not been discovered, and that their dear little island, their secret island, was their very own again. A low and mournful noise came from the inside of the hill. It was poor old Daisy the cow, sad at being left alone in the cave. The children couldn't help laughing now. "Do you remember how Daisy frightened those men?" chuckled Jack. "She frightened me too," said Peggy. "I really thought they'd found us when that man got up to the part we'd blocked up," said Jack. "Yes, it was a jolly good thing we did block it up," said Peggy. "We would most certainly have been found if we hadn't." "And it was a good thing Mike sank the boat," said Nora. "If they had found a boat here, they would have gone on looking for us till they'd found us." "I wonder what they meant when they said that such a surprise was waiting for us," said Mike. "It couldn't have been a nice surprise, I suppose." "Of course not," said Peggy. "They're almost out of sight," said Nora. "Do you think it's safe to get up and do a dance or something, Jack? I'm just longing to shout and sing and dance after being shut up in the cave for so long." "Yes, we're safe enough now," said Jack. "They won't come back. We can settle into the caves for the winter quite happily." "Shall we light a fire on the beach and have a good hot meal?" said Peggy. "I think we could all do with one." "Right," said Jack, and they set to work. Soon they were eating as if they had never had a meal in their lives before. And then a loud moo from the hillside reminded them that Daisy was still there. So, leaving the girls to clear up, Jack sped off with Mike to get Daisy and the hens. "You're a good old cow, Daisy," Jack said to her, rubbing her soft nose. "We hoped you wouldn't moo when those men were hunting for us, but you knew better, and you mooed at them and sent them off." The days were much shorter now, and night came early. It didn't seem long before the sun went and the stars shone out in the sky. "Oh, I'm sleepy," said Jack at last. "Let's have some chocolate and a last talk and go to bed. You know, we shall soon have to think seriously of going to live in the caves. It won't be nice weather much longer." "We'll decide everything tomorrow," said Mike sleepily, munching his chocolate. They were soon asleep, for the day's excitement had quite tired them out. But how lovely it was to wake the next day and know that the hunt was over and that they were safe for the winter. How they sang and joked and teased one another as they went down to bathe. "Ooh," said Nora as she slipped into the water. "It's getting jolly cold to bathe in the lake, Jack. Have we got to do this all the winter?" "Of course not," said Jack. "We'll have to give it up soon, but it's nice whilst it's warm enough." That week the weather became really horrid. Storms swept over the lake, and the children thought it looked just like the sea, with its big waves curling over and breaking on the beach with a crash. The waves ran right up the beach, and it was impossible to make a fire there. "I think we'll have to give up Willow House now and go to live in the caves," said Jack one morning after a very wild night. The wind had slashed at the trees all night long, the rain had poured down, and, to the children's dismay, a little rivulet of rain had actually come into Willow House from the back and had soaked the heather bed Peggy and Nora were lying on. The leaves were falling from the trees. Every tree and bush had flamed out into yellow, crimson, pink, brown or orange. The island was a lovely sight to see when the sun came out for an hour or two, for then its rays lighted up all the brilliant leaves and they shone like jewels. But now the leaves were falling. Leaves were dropping down in Willow House from the branches that made the roof. It was funny to lie in bed at night and feel a leaf drop lightly onto your cheek. Willow House looked different now that there were so few green or yellow leaves growing on the roof and walls. It was bare and brown. Nora caught a cold and began to sneeze. Jack said they must move to the caves at once, or they would all get cold. And if they were ill, what would happen? There was no doctor to make them well. They dosed Nora with hot milk and wrapped her up in the 2 new blankets Jack had bought in the village one week when he'd been marketing.
They set her at the back of the outer cave with a candle beside her, for it was dim in that corner. She soon got better and was able to help the others when they made their plans for living in the cave. "We'll make this outer cave our living room and bedroom," Jack said, "and the inner one shall be our storeroom. We'll always have a fire burning at the entrance, and that will warm us and cook our food. This is going to be rather fun. We shall be cave people this winter." That week, the children made all their plans for passing the winter in the cave. Already all their stores were safely placed in the inner cave. It was just a question of getting the outer cave comfortable and homelike. Peggy was wonderful at this sort of thing. "You two boys must make a few shelves to put round the cave," she said. "You can weave them out of stout twigs and put them up somehow. We'll keep our books and games there and any odd things we want. You must somehow manage to hang the lantern from the middle of the roof. Then, in the corner over here, we'll have our beds of heather and bracken." Peggy swept up the floor of the cave with a brush made of heather twigs, and then she and Nora threw fine sand on it which they'd brought from the beach. It looked very nice. The boys brought in the heather and bracken for the beds. Peggy arranged them comfortably, and then threw a blanket over each bed but one. There were only 3 blankets, 2 new ones and 1 old one, so it looked as if someone must go without. "What's the 4th bed going to have for a blanket?" asked Jack. And then Peggy brought out a great surprise. It was a fur rug, made of rabbit skins that she had carefully cleaned, dried and sewn together. How the others stared! "But how lovely, Peggy," said Jack. "It's a most beautiful fur rug, and we'll be as warm as toast. We'll take it in turns to have it on at night." "Yes, that's what I thought," said Peggy, pleased to find the others admired her rabbit rug so much. "It was very hard to sew the skins together, but I did it at last. I thought it would be a nice surprise for when the cold weather came." Soon the cave began to look very homely indeed. The shelves were weighed down with books and games, the lantern swung in the middle, and they all knocked their heads against it before they became used to it there. The beds lay neatly in the corner at the back, covered with blankets and the rabbit rug. In another corner stood the household things that Peggy was always using, the kettle, the saucepans, and so on. It was very cosy in the cave when the wind howled round the hillside. The light from the lantern shone down, and sometimes Peggy had an extra candle beside her when she sewed. The boys scraped at a bit of wood, carving something, or played a game with Nora. Sometimes they read out loud. The fire burnt brightly and lighted up the cave brilliantly every now and again when extra big flames shot up. Oh, it was great fun. There was always plenty to do. Daisy still had to be milked each morning and evening. She seemed quite happy living in the grassy field, and the boys had built her a sort of shelter where she went at night. There were the hens to feed and look after. They were in a yard near the cave now. They were not laying so many eggs, but the children had plenty of stores and didn't worry about eggs. November passed by. Sometimes there were lovely fine days when the children could sit out on the hillside and bask in the sun. Sometimes there were wind-swept days when the rain pelted down and the clouds raced across the sky, black and ragged. Then the lake was tossed into white-topped waves. Mike and Jack had got the boat up again and mended it. They had pulled it up the beach as far as they could to be out of reach of the waves. When December came, the children began to think of Christmas. It would be strange to have Christmas on the island.
"Christmas will be funny with only just ourselves," said Peggy. "I don't know if I will like it. I like hearing carols sung and seeing the shops all full of lovely things and looking forward to Christmas stockings and crackers and things like that." "Before our Daddy and Mummy flew off in their aeroplane and got lost, we used to have Christmas with them," Nora said to Jack. "It was lovely then. I remember it all."
"I wish Daddy and Mummy hadn't gone away and got lost forever," said Mike. Jack listened as the 3 children told him all they had done at Christmas time when their father and mother had been with them. He had always lived with his old grandfather, who'd never bothered about Christmas. To Jack, this all seemed wonderful.
How Mike and Nora and Peggy must miss all the things they used to do when they had their father and mother with them. The boy listened and made up his mind about something. He would take the boat and row off to the end of the lake just before Christmas. He still had some money, and with that he would buy crackers, a doll for Nora, a new workbox for Peggy, something for Mike, and some oranges and sweets. They should have a fine Christmas. He said nothing to the others about it. He knew that they would be terribly afraid that he might be caught again. But he did not mean to go to the same village as before. He meant to walk to the one 5 miles away, where he would not be known, and buy what he wanted there. A good day came when the pale wintry sun shone down and the sky was a watery blue. Peggy was busy clearing up after breakfast. Mike meant to rebuild Daisy's shelter, which had been rather blown about by the wind, and Nora was going to look for pine cones.
"What are you going to do, Jack?" asked Peggy.
"Oh," said Jack, "I think I'll take the old boat out and go for a row to get myself warm. Haven't rowed for ages."
"I'll come with you, Jack," said Nora.
"No, Nora," he said. "You go out and look for cones. I shall be gone a good while. Peggy, could you let me have some food to take with me?"
"Food?" said Peggy in amazement. "However long are you going for, Jack?"
"Oh, just a few hours," said Jack. "Some exercise will do me good. I'll take my fishing line too." "Well, put on your overcoat then," said Peggy. "You'll be cold out on the lake." She put some rolls and a hard-boiled egg into a basket, together with some milk. Jack said goodbye and set off down the hillside. Nora came with him, half sulky at not being allowed to go in the boat.
"You might let me come, Jack," she said.
"You can't come today, Nora," said Jack. "You'll know why when I come back." He pushed off and rowed out onto the lake, and Nora soon left the beach and went to seek for cones. She thought she would try and see where Jack was fishing after a time, and went to the top of the hill, but try as she would, she could see no sign of the boat. She thought that very strange. Hours went by, and Jack did not come back.
"Do you think he's gone to the village again to get anything?" asked Peggy at last.
"Nora says she couldn't see his boat anywhere on the lake when she looked, and if he was fishing anywhere near, we should easily see him." "Oh dear," said Mike, worried. "If he goes to that village, he'll be caught again." But Jack hadn't been caught. Something else had happened. Something very extraordinary. He had got safely in the boat to the far end of the lake, and had tied the boat up to a tree. Then he'd slipped through the wood and taken the road that led to the distant village 5 miles away. The boy padded along the wintry road. It was muddy and cold, but he was as warm as toast. He jingled his money in his pocket, and wondered if he could buy all he wanted to. He did badly want to get a doll for Nora, for he knew how much she would love it. He carried the food Peggy had given him, and when he got near the village, he sat up on a gate and ate it. Then off he went again. He didn't think anyone would know him to be one of the runaways, for surely people had forgotten all about them by now. It was half a year since they'd first run off to the island. But he was keeping a sharp lookout in case he saw anyone looking at him too closely. He went into the village. It was a big, straggling one, with a small high street running down the middle. There were about 6 shops there. Jack went to look at them. He left the toy and sweet shop till last. He looked at the turkeys in the butcher's shop, some with red ribbons on. He looked into the draper's shop and admired the gay streamers that floated all about it to decorate it for Christmas. And then he came to the toy shop. Dolls stood in the window with their arms stretched out, as if they were asking people to buy them. Jack stood gazing, wondering which doll to buy for Nora. He had already seen a nice little work basket for Peggy, and had spied a book for Mike about boats. There was a box of red crackers at the back of the window, too, which he thought would do well for Nora. It would be such fun to pull them on Christmas Day in the cave and wear paper hats there. Jack went into the shop. It had 2 or 3 other people there, for the shop was a post office too, and people were sending off Christmas parcels. The people in the shop were talking to one another. At first, Jack didn't listen, and then he heard something that made him prick up his ears. This is what he heard. "Yes, it's a great pity those children were never found," said one woman. "Their father and mother are quite ill with grief, I've heard." "Oh, poor things," said the second woman. "It's bad enough to come down in an aeroplane on a desert island and not be found for 2 years, and then to come back safe to see your children and learn that they've disappeared." Jack's eyes nearly dropped out of his head. What did this mean? Could it possibly mean that Mike's father and mother had turned up again? Forgetting all about being careful, Jack caught hold of the arm of the first woman. "Please," he said, "please tell me something. Were the 3 children you're talking about called Mike, Peggy and Nora, and is it their father and mother that have come back?" The woman in the shop stared at the excited boy in astonishment. "Yes," said the first woman, "those were the children's names. They disappeared in June with another boy called Jack and have never been found. And in August, the missing father and mother were found far away on a Pacific island and brought back safely here. Their aeroplane had come down and smashed, and they had been living there until a ship picked them up." "But their children had gone," said the shop assistant, joining in, "and it almost broke their hearts, for they'd been worrying about them for months and longing to see them." "What do you know about all this?" suddenly said one of the women. "You're not one of the children, are you?" "Never mind about that," said Jack impatiently. "Just tell me one thing. Where are the father and mother?" "Oh, they're not far away," said the shop assistant. "They're staying at an hotel in the next town." "What hotel?" said Jack eagerly. "The Swan Hotel," said the shop assistant, and then the women stared in amazement as Jack tore out of the shop at top speed, his eyes shining and a look of the greatest excitement on his brown face. He ran to the bus stop. He knew that buses went to the town, and he had only one thought in mind, to get to the Swan Hotel and tell Mike's father and mother that their children were safe. Never in his life had Jack been so excited. He jumped into the bus and couldn't keep still. He leapt out of it when it rumbled into the town and ran off to the Swan Hotel. He rushed into the hall and caught hold of the hall porter there. "Where are Captain and Mrs. Arnold?" he cried. "Here, here, not so fast, young man," said the porter, not quite liking the look of the boy in the old overcoat and worn-out shoes. "What do you want the captain for?" "Oh, please, tell me where they are," begged Jack. And at that moment a voice said, "Who's this asking for me? What do you want, boy?" Jack swung round. He saw a tall, brown-faced man looking down at him, and he liked him at once, because he was so like Mike to look at. "Captain Arnold, I know where Mike and Peggy and Nora are," he cried. The captain stared as if he'd not heard aright. Then he took Jack's arm and pulled him upstairs into a room where a lady sat writing a letter. Jack could see that she was the children's mother, for she had a look of Peggy and Nora about her. "This boy says he knows where the children are, Mary," said the captain. Jack poured out his story, and the 2 grown-ups listened without saying a word. When he'd finished, the captain shook hands with Jack, and his wife gave him a hug. "You're a fine friend for our children to have," said the captain, his face shining with excitement. "And you really mean to say that you've all been living together on that little island and nobody has found you?" "Yes," said Jack. "And, oh, sir, is it true that you and Mrs. Arnold have been living on an island too, till a ship picked you up?" "Quite true," said Captain Arnold with a laugh. "Our plane came down and smashed, and there we were, lost on an island in the Pacific Ocean. Little did we know that our children were going to live alone on an island too. This sort of thing must be in the family." "John, we must go at once to them," said Mrs. Arnold, who was almost crying with joy. "Quickly, this very minute, I can't wait." "We'd better get a proper boat," said Jack. "Our old boat is a leaky old thing now." It wasn't long before a car was brought round to the door, and Jack, Captain and Mrs. Arnold were motoring to the lakeside. They hired a big boat from a fisherman there and set off to the secret island. Meanwhile, the 3 children were getting more and more worried. It was past tea time now, and getting dark. Where could Jack be? "I can hear the splash of oars," cried Peggy at last. They ran down to the beach and saw the outline of the boat in the twilight coming near to the island. And then Mike saw that it was a bigger boat than their own, and there were 3 people in it instead of 1. "That means Jack's been caught, and these people have been sent to get us," he thought, and his heart sank. But then, to his amazement, he heard Jack's voice ringing out over the darkening water.
Mike! Peggy! Nora! It's all right! I brought a Christmas present for you!
The 3 children stared. Whatever could Jack mean? But when the boat landed and Captain and Mrs. Arnold sprang out, they soon knew. "Mummy! Oh, Mummy and Daddy!" shrieked the children and flung themselves at their father and mother. You couldn't tell which were children and which were grown-ups because they were all so mixed up. Only Jack was alone. He stood apart looking at them, but not for long. Nora stretched out her hand and pulled him into the crowd of excited, happy people. "You belong too, Jack," she said. Everyone seemed to be laughing and crying at the same time. But at last it was so dark that no one could see anyone else. Jack lighted the lantern that Mike had brought down to the beach and led the way to the cave. He badly wanted Captain and Mrs. Arnold to see how lovely it was. They all crowded inside. There was a bright fire crackling just outside, and the cave was warm and cosy. Jack hung the lantern up. Peggy flew to heat some milk and put out rolls of bread and some potted meat she'd been saving up for Christmas. "Oh, what a lovely home," said Mrs. Arnold. The cave was very neat and tidy and looked so cosy and friendly. How they all talked! How they jumped up and down and laughed and told first this thing and then the other. Only one thing made Captain and Mrs. Arnold angry, and that was the tale of how unkind Aunt Harriet and Uncle Henry had been. "They shall be punished," said Captain Arnold, and that was all he said about them. Daisy chose to moo loudly that night, and Captain Arnold laughed till the tears came into his eyes when he heard about the night that poor Daisy had had to swim behind the boat to the island. And when he heard how she had mooed and frightened away the people who had come to look for them, he laughed still more. "Someone will have to write a book about your adventures," he said. "I never in my life heard anything like them. We didn't have such thrilling adventures on our island. We just lived with the native people there till a boat picked us up. Very dull indeed." Jack disappeared at that moment, and when he came back, he carried a great load of heather. He flung it down in a corner. "You'll stay with us tonight, won't you, Captain?" he said. "We'd love to have you. Please do." "Of course," said Captain Arnold, and Mrs. Arnold nodded her dark head. "We will all be together in the cave," she said, "and then we shall share a bit of your secret island, children, and know what it's like." So that night the children had visitors. They all fell asleep on their heather beds at last, happy, excited, and very tired. What fun to wake up tomorrow with their own father and mother beside them. Mike awoke first in the morning. He sat up and remembered everything. There were his father and mother, fast asleep on their heathery bed in the corner of the cave. It was true, then. He hadn't dreamt it all. They were alive and well and had got their children again. Everything was lovely. Mike crept out to light the fire. The sky was a very pale blue, and the sun was trying to break through a thin mist in the east. It was going to be fine. When the fire was crackling merrily, everyone woke up. Nora flung herself on her mother, for she couldn't believe she really had a mother again, and had to keep hugging her and touching her. Soon the cave was filled with talk and laughter. Peggy and Nora got the breakfast. Mike showed his father the inner cave and their stores. Jack flew off to milk Daisy. The hens clucked outside, and Nora fetched in 4 brown eggs. Fish from Jack's line, eggs, rolls, the rest of the potted meat, and a tin of peaches made a fine breakfast, washed down with hot tea. The fire died down, and the sunshine came in at the cave entrance.
Everyone went outside to see what sort of a day it was. The lake sparkled blue below. The bare trees swung gently in the breeze. Nora told her mother all about the wild raspberries and strawberries and nuts, and Peggy chatted about the seeds they'd planted and the baskets they could make. And then Captain Arnold said, "Well, I think it's about time we were going." The children looked up at him. "Going? What do you mean, Daddy? Leave our island?" "My dears," said Captain Arnold, "you can't live here always. You are not runaways any more. You are our own children that we love, and we must have you with us." "Yes," said Mrs. Arnold, "we must all go back to a proper home. And you must go to school, my dears. You have been very brave and very clever and very happy too, and now you can have a lovely home with us, and we will all be happy together." "But what about Jack?" asked Nora at once. "Jack is ours too," said Mrs. Arnold. "I'm sure his grandfather will be glad for us to have him for always. He shall have me for his mother, and your father shall be his too. We will all be one big family." Jack wanted to say such a lot, but he couldn't say a single word. It was so strange. His face just went red with joy, and he held Nora's hand so tightly that he hurt her without meaning to. "Mummy, I shall so hate leaving our dear, dear island," said Nora. "And Willow House too, and our cosy cave in the bubbling spring, and everything." "I think I might be able to buy the island for you," said Daddy. "Then, in the holidays, you can always come here and run wild and live by yourselves if you want to. It shall be your very own."
"Oh, Daddy!"
shouted the children in delight.
"We shan't mind going to school and being proper and living in a house if we've got the island to go back to in the holidays."
"But I think you must leave it now and come back home for Christmas," said Mrs. Arnold. "We have our own old home to go back to. You remember it, don't you? Don't you think it would be nice to have Christmas there, and a Christmas pudding and crackers and stockings full of presents?"
"Yes, yes, yes!"
shouted all the children.
"It's just what I longed for," said Nora.
"I was going to buy you some red crackers yesterday, Nora," said Jack, "but I heard the great news before I'd bought anything." "You shall all have red crackers," said Captain Arnold with a laugh. "Now, what about getting off in the boat?"
"Just give us time to say goodbye to everything," said Peggy. "Mummy, come down and see Willow House. We made it ourselves, and it's so pretty in the summer because, you see, it's a live house and grows leaves all the time."
In an hour's time, everyone was ready to leave. The hens were bundled once more into a sack and were most annoyed about it. Daisy was left, and Captain Arnold said he would send a fisherman over for her. It was too cold for her to swim behind the boat. Most of the children's stores were left too. They'd be able to use them when they next went to the island. Peggy took the rabbit rug she'd made. That was too precious to leave. They brought the books too, because they'd got fond of those. They had stored everything carefully in the inner cave and thrown sacks over them in case of damp. They couldn't help feeling a bit sad to leave, although they knew they were going to their own happy home again. At last, everyone was in the boat. Captain Arnold pushed off, and the sound of oars came to Daisy's ears as she stood pulling at the thin winter grass. She stood watching the boat as it bobbed away on the waves.
"Goodbye, dear secret island," said Nora.
"Goodbye, goodbye," said the others. "We'll come back again. Goodbye, Daisy. Goodbye, everything." "And now let's talk about all we're going to do at Christmas," said Mrs. Arnold cheerfully, for she saw that the children were sad at leaving their beloved little island. It was not long before the 4 children and their father and mother, for Jack counted them as his parents too now, were settled happily in their own home. There was such a lot of excitement at first, for the children had to have new dresses, new suits, new underclothes, new socks, new shoes. Mrs. Arnold said that although Peggy had really done her best to keep them tidy, they were quite dropping to pieces.
So off they went shopping and came back feeling as grand as kings and queens, all dressed up in their new things. Peggy looked fine in a blue coat and skirt with a little blue hat. Nora wore red, and the two boys had suits and overcoats of dark blue. Jack felt queer in his. It was the first time in his life he'd ever had anything new of his own to wear, for he'd always gone about in somebody's old things before. The children looked at one another and burst out laughing. "How different we look now," said Mike. "Think of our dirty old rags on the island." It was strange at first to sleep in a proper bed again. The girls slept in a pretty room and had a little white bed each. The boys slept in the next room and had 2 brown beds. At first, they all wondered where they were when they awoke in the morning, but after a few days they got used to it. Christmas drew near. They all went out to buy presents for one another. It was most exciting. They went to London and marvelled at the great shops there. They watched all kinds of ships and boats sailing along in a big tank. They saw model trains tearing round and round a little countryside, going through tunnels, stopping at stations, just like a real train. It was all very exciting after living such a peaceful life on their island. Christmas was lovely. They hung up their socks at the end of their beds, and in the morning what fun they had finding the things packed tightly in the long stockings. Bigger presents were at the foot of the bed, and how excited all the children were unpacking them.
"This is better than Christmas in the cave," said Nora, unpacking a great big smiling doll with curly golden hair. "Oh, Jack, did you really buy this for me? Oh, how lovely, lovely, lovely!" Soon the bedrooms were full of dolls, books, trains, aeroplanes and motor cars. It was the loveliest Christmas morning the children had ever had, and certainly Jack had never in his life known one like it. He just simply couldn't believe his luck. "You deserve it all, Jack," said Nora. "You were a good friend to us when we were unhappy, and now you can share with us when we are happy." There was a Christmas tree after tea with more presents, and as for the crackers, you should have seen them. Red ones and yellow ones, blue ones and green ones. Soon everyone was wearing a paper hat, and how the children laughed when Captain Arnold pulled a cracker and got a tiny aeroplane out of it. "Well, you can't fly away in that, Daddy," cried Peggy. "You won't ever fly away again, Daddy, will you?" said Nora, suddenly frightened in case her father and mother should fly off again and be lost, so that the 4 children would be alone once more. "Nope, never again," said her father. "Mummy and I have made such a lot of money out of our flying now that we can afford to stay at home and look after you. We shall never leave you again." It was 4 happy children who went to bed that night. The boys left the door open between their room and the girls, so that they might all talk to one another till they fell asleep. They couldn't get out of this habit, for they had always been able to talk to one another in bed on the island. "Oh, it's been a lovely day," said Peggy sleepily. "But I do just wish something now." "What?" asked Mike. "I do just wish we could all be back in our cosy cave on our secret island for 5 minutes," said Peggy. "So do I," said everyone, and they lay silent, thinking of the happy days and nights on the island. "I shall never, never forget our island," said Nora. "It's the loveliest place in the world, I think. I hope it isn't feeling lonely without us. Good night, Secret Island. Wait for us till we come again." "Good night, Secret Island," said the others. And then they slept, and dreamt of their island, of the summer days when they would go there once more and live merrily and happily alone in the hot sunshine, of winter days in the cosy cave, of cooking over a campfire and sleeping soundly on heathery beds. Dear Secret Island, only wait, and you shall have the children with you once again.